Morning, everybody. If you guys could all please rise. Flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have a little bit of a full house here tonight. So we'll try to get through everything as timely as possible and answer everybody's questions and do our best job. As per requirement, notice is hereby given. It's a regular meeting of the Borough of Highlands Land Use Board, and all requirements have been met. Notice has been transmitted to the Asbury Park Press and the Two River Times. Notice has been posted on the bulletin board. Won't actually be taken. At this point, we have some people that have been reappointed to positions, and I believe one new board member. Okay. So, Council.
Yes, sir.
Rizzuto, yes, okay.
So, hi everyone. My name is Anne Marie Rizzuto. I'm an attorney with Wiener Law Group, and I'm going to serve as your counsel for tonight's meeting. And the first order of business is to swear in 5 people. So as I read the oath of office, I'm not going to say anyone's name, but you obviously will refer to yourself as I, and read through out loud. I'm going to you repeat after me as we do that. And you should raise your right hand. Yes, why don't you stand? Do you mind? Very good. Okay, so raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and the governments established in the United States and in this state under the authority of the people, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all of the duties of the office of Land Use Board Member, according to the best of my ability. So help me God. Thank you very much. So if each of you would sign and then pass them down, I will witness. Congratulations.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Okay, let's call for a roll call.
Mayor Beyond?
Here.
Chief Burton?
Here.
Mr. Kutash?
Here.
Ms. LaRussa?
Here.
Mr. Montecalvo?
Here.
Councilmember Olszewski?
Here.
Mr. Zill?
Here.
Ms. Tierney?
Here.
Mr. Knox?
Here.
Ms. Chang is absent. Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mr. Zamba? Absent. And Ms. Peterson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, this is open for public comment. This part of the meeting is really only on a procedural end. Has nothing to do with any cases tonight. It's just the procedure on how we go about, I guess, our procedures. Is there any question on how we do our thing around here at all? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. Okay, under resolutions, LUB resolution 2023-1, nomination vote for chairperson.
I nominate Rob Knox.
Second.
Okay, thank you guys. Roll call.
Okay, hold on a second. That was Mr. Kutash nominating, and Ms. Tierney second. Mayor Beyond?
Yes.
Chief Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Olszewski?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Kutash?
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa?
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo?
Yes.
Ms. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Zill?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, LUB resolution excuse me, 2023-02, nomination of vote for chairperson, vice chairperson.
I nominate Anne Marie Tierney.
I'll second it.
Okay. Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa, Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Ms. Tierney.
Does it stand?
No.
Yes.
Please vote for yourself. Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. LUB Resolution 2023-03, Board Secretary.
I nominate Nancy Trent.
Second.
Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, LUB Resolution 2023-04, awarding professional legal service contract. I'll need the Wiener Group, please.
Second.
Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. LUB Resolution 2023-05, awarding professional engineering service contracts. Okay, I'd like to nominate Ed Herman, CNN.
I'll second that.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Mr. Burton.
Chief Burton, okay. Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
LUB Resolution 2023-06, designation of 2003 meetings, the dates, 2004 reorganization dates. Or dates, I'm sorry. Any change in our meeting schedule? Okay, so we'll continue forward with our
Second
second
Thursday.
Thursday, 7 o'clock, same location, until further notice,
Yes.
or at least for another year. Okay, I'll offer that motion.
I'll make it.
Mr. Kutosh, second. Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
LUB Resolution 2023-07, designation of the Asbury Park Press and Trooper Times as the official newspapers. I'll make
I'll make
that.
that.
I'll second.
Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Zill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moralization of LUB 2022-08, the honorable plan, conditional use with variance. Okay, I'll offer that.
I'll second.
Mayor Breon,
Yes.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa,
Yes.
Mr. Montecalvo abstained, Councilmember Oshetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Zill, Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Chair Knox.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, on to the hearings on new business. We have a subdivision, LUB 2022-09, Rural Highlands Block 101, Block 3, Locust Street. I understand that we have our mayor and council, we're stepping down, our mayor and council will be stepping down for this application.
You are, are you going to leave? No, we're recused from that one as well. You're ineligible. Ineligible for both. Okay, so the record should reflect that the mayor and the councilwoman are ineligible to vote on the second application under the statute. This matter, they are recused versus borough property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andy Ball. I'm an attorney with Davis & Eastman Munoz Payon, and we represent the Borough of Highlands. Here tonight for the application for the subdivision of Block 101, Lot 3. That's a property located in the WC2 zone. It's approximately 29,000 square feet at the end of Matthews Street, and I believe our engineer, Ben Matlack, is passing out some handouts as I'm going through it. It should be up on the board as well. My plan is to give a brief overview of what we're asking for and why we're doing it, and then turn it over to Ben to go through the details of the application, the property at issue, and then the resulting properties if the subdivision is approved. So, as that brief overview, this property is currently open space. It's owned by the borough. The borough acquired it as part of an in-rem tax foreclosure proceeding back in approximately 2001. In 2001, the judgment was recorded, vesting title with the borough. It's existed since that time as open space. Prior to that, it was listed on the borough's recreation and open space inventory, preserved for open space purposes, but through the borough's lease interest that it had prior to actually acquiring the title. Since it acquired the title, it's just been maintained as open space. There's two real purposes behind subdividing this parcel, and the plan is to subdivide the southern portion of the property. Just as another general description, the north is a beach that fronts on Sandy Hook Bay. As you move south along the property, it's just open, grassy, and sandy area, and then the very southern border has residential properties abutting it, as well as some encroachments from those adjacent residential properties. So the first purpose behind the application is to subdivide the portion where any of the encroachments exist. It would result in 4 total lots, with 3 of them on the southern end of the portion. The remaining 4th lot is the majority of that parcel, would remain owned by the borough. That way, it can kind of slice off the portion where the encroachments are, and ultimately the borough will be interested in selling those parcels to the adjacent property owners for fair market value. Those encroachments are not a recent thing. They've existed for the better part of a century. They're reflected in deeds dating back to 1977, and frankly, they probably existed prior to that when the structures were built in approximately the 1940s. So it's not a new condition. It's something the borough recognizes has been used as essentially those residential properties for a very long period of time. The borough is not looking to have anyone's houses knocked down. Instead, we're looking to resolve the issues and be sure the borough is compensated for that resolution. So the second portion behind the application is because, as I mentioned, prior to the borough's ownership of the parcel, it was listed as a lease interest on its recreation and open space inventory. That's something the DEP maintains. It recognizes, obviously, properties that are used for recreation and open space purposes, but requires that any of those properties not have encroachments from the adjacent properties, be free of such encroachments. And so the borough is now has a number of grant applications and is looking to update its recreation and open space inventory. I'm going to say ROSI for short, so I don't have to keep repeating that. But looking to update it, recognize the new ownership interest that the borough has in this property, and looking to dedicate it without any encroaching properties to make sure there's no issues with DEP. So to resolve all of those previously mentioned issues. The borough is really looking to maintain the status quo of these properties as they've been used for, as I mentioned, the better part of a century here. And in doing that, there are a few bulk variances associated with the resulting lots, and our engineer will go into a little more detail. But before I turn it over to the engineer, I did just briefly want to address 2 of the comments from the board engineer's letter, specifically that being comment number 4. Questions it was a 10-foot wide flag stem which would connect Matthews Street to what looks like the remaining portion of this parcel. The engineer correctly presumed that that was in order to maintain public access to this parcel. One of the DEP's requirements under the public trust doctrine in New Jersey is that anytime you have beachfront property and water access, you have to ensure public access, and we wanted to ensure that that portion of the property was not cut off from Matthew Street. So the 10-foot wide area meets the requirements for access under the DEP regulations, and that is in fact the purpose behind that section of the property. The other comment I wanted to address is the comment number 6, asking what happens if negotiations with the adjacent property owners for the potential sale of these resulting smaller lots is unsuccessful. So this is in fact kind of an intermediate step. The borough is looking to subdivide the parcels, where it would then be the owner of all 4 of these parcels, and then would proceed to attempt to negotiate, sell off those encroaching areas to the adjacent properties. Normally, under the local lands and buildings law, when you're selling public property, it has to be to an open bid to all members of the public. But there's an exemption for properties such as this that are undersized and undevelopable, where you can privately sell them only to or among any adjacent property owners. So the borough would be indeed looking to use that process, ensure that these lots do not result in landlocked parcels owned by somebody else who realistically has no use in those parcels. So if the board was so inclined, the borough would certainly be willing to offer as a condition of the board's approval that those resulting parcels would only be sold through that private sale provision in the local lands and buildings law to the contiguous property owners to avoid any issue of a landlocked parcel in the future. So with that, I think that should conclude my summary. I'll pause in case there's any questions from me at this point, or otherwise I would turn it over to Ben Matlack of CME to go through the details of the application.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the board, any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. So, Mr. Ball, the land's remaining parcel that you're talking about, the smaller parcels, if they aren't sold, let's say the adjacent landowners can't come to an agreement either on price or they just don't want to do that. What would happen in that case?
The borough would just retain ownership of those parcels separately, and because there are encroachments on those parcels, they couldn't be added in their current state to the Rossi, which is why we carved them out and just maintain ownership separately.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
I'm so sorry, I'm just trying to follow with the road that will maintain 10 feet, the borough property, that's not going to be an easement to the borough's maintaining.
That's right. That's not right. It's not an easement. It's that section of the property is technically part of the overall property.
Okay.
It's just solely for purposes of each.
And it's the same width of the road that's there now?
It's less. It's the road, I believe, is approximately 20 feet, and so this is a 10-foot access portion.
Is that sufficient space for?
It's not intended to be a road. It's only intended to ensure the public has access to that portion of the park.
And what's the thinking about giving away the full part of the road instead of just keeping the encroachments as they are and that's the new lots? Why is the road being narrowed by that many feet?
Well, it's not a road.
Well, it's a road. People park on the road, they drive through it to get to their home, so.
The road ends at the property boundary. What's that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're the one person.
The engineer might be able to give a little more detail.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me, or?
Do we have any questions for?
Yeah, I have one. What's the nature of the encroachment? What's the size of it?
So there's a combination, and I think, again, the engineer can get into a little more detail, but there's the buildings that were constructed way back when do encroach approximately 10 feet. And then there's additionally a deck on one of the properties that encroaches a good deal further than that. So it's a combination of encroachments on the properties.
One more question, just why 3 parcels? Why are we subdividing?
So the lot lines are meant to be contiguous with those adjacent properties. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Do you guys have any other questions?
Sir, is this exhibit the colored portions an exhibit already? Was it part of your application?
I don't believe it was. I think we'll need to mark it.
Okay, so have you pre-marked anything?
No.
Okay,
This actually should be marked as well, we have it out.
yes, the handout, what's up on the board is the handout.
They're not the same thing. Two different areas.
Okay, so we have to mark one of these. So the board, please identify the name of that plan.
Sure, this is called, it's titled Outbound Survey with an aerial overlay.
Okay, what is the date?
It is dated August 2nd, 2022.
Please put A1 on the bottom right-hand corner. And then with respect to the two-page handout, one appears to be a Google Earth picture of the subject property and surrounding property, and attached to it is an amended major subdivision plan.
Yes, that was the subdivision plat that was submitted with the application.
Okay. And what is amended about it?
There were...
Not what is amended about it, what is the amended date?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the original date was January 16th of 2023, and the amended date is January 30th of 2023.
Okay.
Just, excuse me for 1 second. Are we getting this on the record? Can you hear him? Is it picking up?
Yeah.
Okay, want to make sure that has, yeah, no, of course, because of the times we've had issues with our microphones and our sound equipment, we want to make sure this is all documented appropriately. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
So the first one will be A2, and the second page will be A3. And did you have a set that you can give to the clerk, or does she have a set already?
Yeah.
And with respect to A1, did you give a copy of that to the clerk?
I did not, but you can have it.
Okay. It comes off the whiteboard, so we can store it. Thank you. We must maintain this.
Okay. I guess before you get too much further, you can tell us a little bit about your credentials and who you are and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Ben Matlack. I'm the Highlands Borough Engineer.
Speak a little louder.
Sure.
Maybe once you go to the microphone, that probably would be a better plan. Thank you.
My name is Ben Matlack. I'm the Highlands Borough Engineer. I'm with the firm CME Associates. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, in good standing. I've been a practicing engineer for 12 years, and I've appeared before several boards throughout the state. I also represent several boards throughout the state.
Okay, thank you.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the existing aerial that's Exhibit A2 that's in front of you. This is just a Google Earth image of the property with my crude outline drawing of the approximate property boundary. And as you can see at the bottom of the page, which is the south side of the property, there are numerous encroachments from the adjoining property. A few buildings, a large deck, and concrete patio area that have been encroaching onto the borough property for, as Andy mentioned, several decades. So we're here tonight again to kind of clean this up. If we look at the next page, which is this one here, this is our subdivision plat. And you can see that the existing structure and deck extend almost the entire width of the area that we're portioning off, which is about 52 feet worth of encroachment. So this is really a necessary step to clean this up. To answer your question about the access, Matthew Street is right here, but the right-of-way ends before the borough property, and the road ends. So there is no roadway that's being given away. There's no pavement that's going to be removed. There are no improvements. It's simply leaving a 10-foot wide access way that is gravel, and leads to the beach. This is a grassy area, and then you have the beach over here by the Sandy Hook bed.
That 10-foot right away, is that going to be wide enough to get a fire truck down in case they get to get to the back of those townhouses are next door? Or is it going to be, or does it need to be wider?
Doesn't need to be wider. They don't need to get a fire truck down there.
Well, I'm just thinking if there's a fire back behind those condos next door to it, they can't, they gotta get back there for any kind of access to the property.
There's no need to.
There is enough room to get maintenance vehicles or mowing the grass or doing any other type of maintenance that the borough needs to do. But as the chief said, fire trucks should be able to access the buildings just as they do right now.
So my question was, why are we giving away the existing right-of-way?
So we're not
keeping the full right-of-way that we have right now.
right. So we're not giving away existing right-of-way
Well, we're
necessarily.
pushing it to a smaller strip.
What we're looking at is the encroachments from the one of the properties, and because the encroachment includes fencing and concrete and other improvements that extend beyond where an extension of Matthew Street would be. That's why it's being shrunk down to 10 foot wide, and that's really all you need for the public access to get to this area. So the lots that are being portioned off, they're not intended to be standalone lots. As Andy mentioned, the sizes of them are approximately, two lots are approximately 1,800 square feet. One is just over 1,300 square feet. So these are not buildable lots on their own, but they'll be, the intent is to sell them to the adjoining property owners. The rest of the property is a flag lot with the 10-foot access and the open space will be maintained.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble figuring out the dimensions. So I went to the property today. I saw that there's like the big deck and the big concrete pad. This looks like we're going to be creating a lot that goes farther out than the existing encroachment. How much farther out from the pad? So how many spaces coming out?
Oh, so that behind the deck there is an additional concrete pad, and I think you can see it on the aerial.
So I guess my question is on your map, which is really helpful, so thank you. Where are we subdividing? Here, right at the back of that encroachment?
Yes, just
or is
just
there
beyond,
additional footage?
Right, just beyond where the end of the concrete pad is on that area.
So that's how many feet more?
Beyond the concrete pad?
Correct.
I can measure it for you. Just about 1 foot beyond the concrete pad.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I want to just clarify one thing, that there was some back and forth discussion between the borough and the Bayview Condo Association neighboring property. There was a discrepancy on where exactly the adjoining property line was. We went back to as far as 1907 to do some deep research, found a riparian grant that identified exactly the bearing distance of the adjoining property line, and we cleared up the discrepancy of the HOA bulkhead to verify that it is completely on their property, not encroaching on the borough property. So that I believe has been clarified, and I don't think there are any issues there. So the variances that we're looking for here, obviously the size of the lots do not conform to the ordinance, and then a few frontages, widths, and depths. So the two properties that have lot frontage are the remaining borough property, and this first one, 3.03. They both have 10 feet of frontage on Matthew Street, only on the dead end portion. They don't front onto the, I guess you'd say the side of Matthews. The lot widths for both of these same two properties as well do not conform to the ordinance. One being confirmed with your board engineer's letter. The borough property, 3.01, has a 99.77 lot width where 100 feet is required, and lot 3.03 has a 35 foot width where 100 feet is required. Now the other two lots do not require variance because of the way the ordinance is written. Because they don't have any frontage, they're not considered the same way. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but the lot width is measured along the property frontage. And then the lot depth of lot 3.03, same thing. It does not meet the required ordinance. 51.37 feet where 150 feet is required. And as Andy explained, we feel this is appropriate because it's cleaning up these existing encroachments and allowing the borough to get this into the open space at Rust.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. With respect to lot 3.04, there's encroachments from two buildings into that lot, correct? There's the encroachment the house is built over the property line, and then there's the encroachment of the company pad.
Yes.
So how would it be decided who would purchase that property? Because whoever buys it is buying something with an encroachment on it from somebody else.
Right. So I'll explain exactly how we handle that, and I'll also take over to Andy.
Okay.
So you're absolutely correct. Lot 3.04 does have the building that encroaches here, but also from lot 3.03, there's a concrete pad that encroaches onto 3.04. The way that is being handled is there is a 10-foot wide access easement to the benefit of lot 3.03 onto the 3.04 property.
And further along that point, there's the tentative agreement with the adjacent property owner. That concrete pad has, I guess, grown over time, but they are cutting it back. So it does.
Fairly new to me.
Yeah, it won't encroach onto that
So they're
adjacent
going to
lot.
pull it back?
Yes. Assuming the subdivision goes through and it would ultimately be sold to them.
I guess it's fair to say also, a lot of these issues are because this property is a flag lot.
Yes, exactly.
For the audience, that means that there's a narrow entranceway or the property opens. Think of a flag post and then a flag itself. And that's triggering some of the setbacks and frontage variances. Any other questions from the board?
Sure. I would imagine for both of you, you have years of experience doing this. You are bound by your licenses to act ethically in coming to these conclusions, and you both represent the best interests of the borough, correct?
Correct.
So in your experience, this is the way to do this. Would I assume that? This is the best way that you can see that we can possibly do this, to rectify this situation. If we said no, and we just said to the property owner, hey, that's our property, take down your deck, cut your house in half, however that would be, how would that play out?
Not well, probably extensive and expensive litigation would be my guess.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have just one more question. So what I noticed today was that there's a number of cars that park along that access road. Will that become a no parking zone to make sure there's access to the beach?
As a matter of fact, the borough is working on an ordinance to restrict parking along that street.
Okay. But I would not want us to provide access to the beach that you can actually access because there's trucks all around there.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
so if there's no other questions, I'll just mention briefly in closing, we think that this is something that advances the purposes of the municipal land use law. There are positive criteria advanced by this application, specifically purposes A and G, it being guiding appropriate uses or development of the lands of the borough, and further providing sufficient space for both the residential uses on the southern end of the portion of the property, as well as the recreational uses of open space on the northern end of the property. And frankly, we do not see any negatives associated with this application. It's recognizing uses that have existed for a number of years. There's no detriment to the neighbors. It's continuing any of the neighboring uses of the property. And we do not see any impairment of either the zoning ordinances or the master plan, and would just submit it for the board's consideration.
Can I ask one more question? Just for the record. So I know that you noted that it would be sold for fair market value, which is good to hear.
Yes.
What happens if the land is not purchased by the properties that are encroaching? Will we be charging them some kind of rent? I think I saw that, or lease fee. I thought I saw in some of the paperwork that was in the application package that they're paying like $1 a year or something like that. Would we?
I think you may be referring to, I guess, an older lease of this actual property itself. Frankly, the borough hasn't considered whether it would, I guess, start charging. Ultimately, if they aren't sold, it's an encroachment onto borough property, and it could take, as the chief mentioned, either enforcement action or potentially come to some sort of separate agreement with the neighbors. But it's unclear. There's a few possibilities it could go.
Well, it sounds to me the borough still holds the cards.
Yeah.
If the neighbors do not comply or work with the borough, then there could be legal ramifications on that. This can get into a big deal.
Yes, it could.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just interject a couple thoughts. I think this makes sense. It's practical, albeit there are a few nominal, zoning challenges in the undersized lots. I think if it's viewed as a temporary situation that it appears to be, it's in the best interest of the borough ultimately in dealing with Green Acres and Rossi properties. If there are encumbrances and other things, it can get very expensive to deal with those on the back end. So this makes all the sense in the world. I think this board should really look at this favorably. It's definitely in the best interest of the borough to clean up the areas where the title has been, cloudy for some time. You have the whole prescriptive easement conversation that could enter into this. It's potentially very ugly from a legal standpoint. Not that I'm the engineer giving legal advice here, but just in my experience, I think that you would want to approve this just in the best interest of the borough.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Okay, anybody else from the board have any questions? Okay, at this point, we'll open up this to the audience. Questions only. There will be a period for statements, but right now it's just questions for any of the professionals with the Borough of Highlands. Yes, you could stand and state your name and your address, please.
Yeah, my name is Robert Monk.
You know what? Probably better if you go up on a microphone. And again, sir, this is a question for you. Do you have questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. My name is Robert Monk. I own property at 338 Shore Drive, which is basically behind that. I have a question of the road there not being a road. When they just said that it was going to do a parking regulation on there on the road that's not a road, and I'm still not clear why we have to get 10 feet away there when there's no need for it as far as to cure the easement there or whatever the encroachment of the other property. So why are we giving away 10 feet when we don't have to? And we're actually landlocking that property, whether the borough uses it or not. We don't know really what's going to happen in the future. So why?
All right, we can continue, but there won't be a video. So if we're okay with that, we have recording, but no video. Is that okay?
Yes, that's what we have to go with. That's what we'll go with.
As long as you have a record that
Okay.
meeting for appeal is necessary.
Okay, it's on now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess continuing on, I see there are other
Oh, I'm
persons.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Just to clarify, because I asked a question about the gravel access way, not road. How wide is the gravel access way right now? Is it wider than 10 feet? And that was my question earlier. Like, are we decreasing the size of the gravel access pathway, non-road?
Well, there are no improvements, so nothing is going to be removed or added. I don't have the exact width of the gravel access way, but I can tell you what it is. It's maybe in the moment right now about 10 feet.
It's more than 10 feet.
It's 20 feet. Sorry,
So that is my question. So from one side of the fence, there's fences on both sides of this access pathway. To my mind, are we maintaining the current width of the access pathway? Are we giving part of the access pathway to the encroaching property on lot 3.03? If they have a stockade fence, that's already encroaching into the access pathway, but are we putting more space into that property and it's making the access pathway smaller?
The distance between the two fences is 14 feet.
Correct.
And essentially the frontage of the borough lot, which is the public access, will be 10 feet.
And so that's my question, I believe, similar. As well, why are we giving 4 more feet of the gravel access path to the subdivision?
Well, we're giving it or subbing it?
Well, it's not being used by the property right now. Correct.
It's with the intent to sell it, yes.
Giving it and subbing it.
And then if you go down, if you drive down, right, so you have the house, is it on Matthew Street, and they have their fence that juts into the access road. My question is, why are we not just subdividing at the existing fence line instead of subdividing farther into access road?
That's a fair question.
Is that your question as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a fair one, right?
I'll interject that it's probably the obligation is 10 feet under the access doctrine, so that's probably where they start, right? I would say there's probably nothing preventing them from kicking that line over 4 feet, maybe 14 feet wide.
That was my inarticulate question that
That's a good point.
That is, I mean,
I would
that's
think
just
the
getting
borough
4 more
says almost as much property as
yeah,
possible.
4 more feet for that fence to come into the access road. And it's already, I just don't understand the benefits to the borough, but potentially there is one. I mean, I think cleanup pieces is very, very important. We have someone, not deal with litigation, but if that access pathway can be maintained at its current space, it still gives the emerging property all the current improvements inside that subdivision. That is my question.
sure, that can certainly be done.
Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yeah.
My question, Andy, probably, I'm sorry, it might be better answered by you. If in fact this board says move it 4 feet, and you agree with that now, does it go back to the drawing board? Can that be amended here? Sure.
And I appreciate your patience, I just felt like that was a question.
That's what it said.
Refreshing my mind on where that figure came from. The current property owner had an easement with, when this property wasn't owned by the borough, owned by the prior association, covering a portion of the existing deck and it, as well as cutting over that 10 feet. So, or cutting over to the portion where this would result in 10 feet. So in order to avoid the issue of slicing off a piece of that existing easement, which arguably survived the in-rem foreclosure, incorporated into that section, and that's why it's 10 feet now is what's proposed.
So that 4 feet is an easement.
The 4 feet,
With whatever method is the easement.
yes.
Okay. So clarify so that,
Easement runs to which lot?
To the existing, I believe it's lot 4.
Yes.
okay, so that's not a buildable parcel of land. Because of easement.
I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. It's the easement that exists from lot 4 onto the existing lot 3, the borough lot now. And it extends both kind of into the portion of what would be Matthew Street if Matthew Street extended, as well as going to the west to encompass the whole deck area.
So they have an easement that's 4 feet past where the fence is already approaching the property.
I don't want to speak about the numbers, Ben, if you could, I guess, confirm that that's the right distance.
Yeah, that's the right way to describe it. The fence that is existing, the new proposed lot line is 4 feet beyond that fence.
Because the easement.
Because of I guess, an existing easement, that was created for this lot for the road that is currently proposed. I guess or correct me if I'm wrong,
It depends on the type of easement, but I believe that easement was for access and maintenance of the existing structures, including the deck.
The easement you're talking about on the other side of the property? Shown on the plan?
It extends under
A voting lot 303 and lot 304. That's right.
that proposed easement, the easement that Andy's talking about is an existing easement for the existing, encroachment. So essentially, the buildings were there before the easement was granted. The buildings encroached onto the property before it was even borough property.
If it's an existing easement, why isn't it shown on it?
I'm not exactly sure about how the easement was transferred over when the lot was foreclosed on and came into the borough's possession, but, we put whatever easements and property lines that were found onto the survey, and that's how we came up with that. Now, the proposed line, talking about, it's on the pre-existing easement, so that's where that decision was made.
Andy made the statement that the easement arguably would survive the foreclosure. That. I'm sorry, you made a statement that the easement would arguably survive the foreclosure, and it predated the foreclosure.
Yes.
Is that illegal? Is that?
So the interim foreclosure does not extinguish existing easements that were, it's kind of a complicated legal topic, but yes, it doesn't extinguish that easement, in my opinion.
Is that governed underneath this lease agreement, easement agreement that we have in the packet? Because that talks about how it was going back to 1947, and this is dated December 1999.
Part of that is the easement between the Sturgis and the Navasink property.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what's going to survive.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So that is dated 12/10/1999, that is the grade this afternoon. That is completely 2 block, 101 lot 4 from the Navasink Corporation Taxpayers Association. And that easement, we had our lease going at the time. The borough was leasing it in 1990. And, but the easement was given by the property owner at the time. So that came into fruition before the in-ram, et cetera. And what it says is, it talks about the 11-foot encroachment, and then it talks about the concrete encroachment, and then that easement is a perimeter of 10 feet additionally to that property. That's it. So the 10-foot perimeter, there is a map in that easement. I don't know if there's a meet and bounds, but frankly, it should have been on your proposed subdivision because it was of record for a long time. But anyway, the easement exists, and if you're trying to deal with that, and the property owner is okay with moving it 10 feet, from 10 feet to 14 feet, leaving it where it is now, we can do that tonight with the condition that the plan be resubmitted and approved by our engineer and by the, and the condition has to be signed by the chair. So there are methods for us to be able to do that, if that's what we have.
It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like they're staying advanced on this was the easement that was agreed upon, it carries through, and that's what we want to keep.
And it's a combination of that as well as that was kind of incorporated into what was negotiated with the property owner as the scope of what they would be acquiring. So we do have a memorandum of understanding with them. Of course, upon approval, but the borough would prefer to keep the current property boundary located where it is. We do believe it provides sufficient access. It is the required access under the DEP regulations of 10 feet. So we think it would be properly served by that access width.
So you're not requesting anything?
We are not. We're requesting to keep it as proposed.
As it's depicted on the amendment.
So we have another question?
Peterson, 17 Bay Street. How does adverse possession come into play here? Where some of these property owners have had access to certain areas for over a decade and could potentially have to give up their rights, and how does that open up the litigation against the town due to the current adverse possession laws?
By my easy answer. So adverse possession cannot be had as to a public entity. You can, adverse possession is as to private property. If you take your fence and put it on your neighbor's property for 10 feet and it stays there for 20 years and it's open and notorious, there's an adverse possession that your fence can stay there. That can't happen with a public entity. There is no adverse possession as to a public entity.
I don't know if that's correct.
No, that is definitely correct.
I don't know for a fact that it's happening in other towns.
Okay, so again, I'm telling you that in general, so since we own the property, since it's in rent foreclosure, there can't be any adverse possession as to the borough. Now, the in rent foreclosure happens probably after most of these things already exist. They're in place, and as you should be aware, the applicant, the borough, is not looking to move anything that's on the borough's property. They're looking to actually make it better for those property owners while still maintaining an open space for the whole town with the 10-foot access, which DEP will accept. So really, we're not at a question of adverse possession, prescriptive easement, whatever you want to call it. And there really doesn't really need to be litigation about this because the borough is looking to do the right thing. The public purpose here is preserve the property, the beach, and be able to apply for grants because you can't do it like that. You're limited with what you can do with your property because of these encroachments, because you can't get green acres funding or anything else. So that's a public purpose that the borough has put forward. One of the reasons why they're here.
So why wouldn't the borough go ahead and move forward with that without selling the actual property?
Move forward with what?
With making certain agreements with the property owners so that the encroachments are taken care of without selling the property to a third party.
Because
the borough can't give us it. It has to be paid for at a fair market value.
You gave away property down by the, inlet.
I'm sorry, that's the question on this.
Okay, well then, okay, question. How did we give away property at the inlet on the end of that street compared to this?
Our board's trying to talk about something that's not part of the sport.
Right, and I also wanted to just caution the board members. It is not our jurisdiction to ultimately determine what happens with the 3 parcels that are adjacent to the residential house.
So it's not your responsibility. I'm sorry.
1 second. It's not our jurisdiction. We are either going to grant or deny the subdivision, and from there, it's the borough's value to deal with their market value, the negotiations, the agreements. It is definitely beyond what this board should do.
So the question is, it's not your responsibility after the fact, these 3 subdivisions, the current owner could actually come back in 3 years from now and ask to build townhouses.
If there was I'm trying to answer that. If somehow the property changed hands and things along those lines, and they were trying to build on undersized lots, some private entity, not the borough, then they would be before the board. But that's kind of almost like trying to read into the future. You can't predict what may or may not happen with that property. I think the purpose of this application is to kind of right some wrongs. Things that happened, I don't know what because back in the 70s or maybe in the 40s, previous to that. And I think there was testimony that in order for us to do anything with that property, it needs to be clear and defined property limits.
So why can't the town do that? And why does they have, I guess it goes back to my other question, why can't the town define those property lines? And I guess that goes back to your point, you can't give property away, so that sounds counterintuitive. Okay, never mind, I think you answered my question.
Yes, sir. State your name and your address, sir.
Yeah, my name is Gerald Gates. Pardon me. I live at right at the end of Cornwall, near the restaurant. But we're not going to talk about Cornwall. Yeah, between the right near the proving ground and the inlet. But the question is, 20 Cornwall. Public access you speak of, how do you guarantee that is going to remain, you have that space of public access? The only reason I ask is down between the restaurants, on a busy summer day, you can't get there and it's supposed to be public access. So what would happen in this case? Is it guaranteed?
Well, I think at that point it's more of a code issue, fire or police issue. If they're blocking certain crossways, roadways, sidewalks, whatever, this board's not responsible for that. You could call the code enforcement, the police department, things along those lines would handle that sort of thing.
Regarding, let's say, between the restaurants where you can't go anymore? No, this isn't parking. This is supposed to be walk-up access to the water between the restaurants, but you can't do it. I mean, I'm all for the restaurants doing great.
That wasn't before this board. That wasn't a decision this board made. So therefore, we have no knowledge of what transpired. A Cornwall behind that.
Yeah, it's a little ugly now, that's all. Just hopefully this doesn't go that way. I'm just curious how they guarantee it, because when they did the meetings for that, it was during the pandemic and nobody went. Or there were a few people, but...
It's really questions, for what the sports...
Okay. No, I respect that. No, I appreciate it.
City parks in front of your driveway, or in the middle of the street, you call police.
All right, so that's fine. Thank you very much for your time.
Anybody else have any questions? Of course, sir, go back up. Just state your name.
I'm not really, I'm about 338 Shore Drive. I'm not really clear on the easement part of it that we're talking about in the document that was done while the borough had owned, was leasing the property, I believe, and then there was an easement given to the landowner from the property owner. I'm not really sure where that 10 feet goes. We were talking into the, I didn't really read in that whatever the documents were with the, and I'm not really clear on where that 10 feet.
I think it was predetermined that was, that's the plan of action. The easement apparently was from long before the town ever owned it.
I'm sorry to get you the attorney there, but Anne Marie, yeah, she was saying that it was stated on there somewhere that it was an easement with that 10 feet onto the roadway. It's not a roadway.
In 1999, well, I'm not, I didn't say there was, what it reads is a 10-foot perimeter beyond the concrete pad for lot. That's what it said.
Yeah,
The concrete pad was at the time that got moved.
There's a map, but it's not the best.
Yes, well, is there anything in MOU with the property owner that was preclude that from building a standalone home on that property and using the access road as an entryway into that property at this point in time?
Not explicitly off the top of my head, but at that point it would be merged with the adjacent property, and then you would have a principal structure already, and you can't have multiple principal structures on that resulting overall lot. So I think they would wind up back before the board if they were attempting to do that, seeking a good deal of variance.
I have something real quick if you don't mind. This might be a question for you as well. This is you have an MOU in place, right? So this is an application that the Borough of Highlands, not this board, the Borough of Highlands, i.e. the mayor and council, correct?
That's good.
They came up to an agreement with the property owners. So it's not for us to decide whether or not it's for the best thing for Highlands. We're deciding whether or not this is agreed upon between the two parties. I would imagine that if this is approved, it's going to have to be action by the mayor and council with this.
Yes, it would ultimately go to an ordinance authorizing the formal sale of the property in accordance with the terms of the memorandum of understanding.
And public notice.
This board is not approving this.
Correct.
The mayor and council have to ultimately approve this.
The ultimate
This is
sale.
what
That's
they
correct.
want. This is what the property owners want.
Yes.
We're putting a subdivision.
You have to approve.
Right.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But tangentially, you also included some values.
Oh, right, with all that,
And
yes.
for that, we do look at purposes as the attorney already set forth. And so a purpose of enhancing the recreational use of the bigger portion of this property, where the beach and the assets, is a public purpose that the board members can consider, because the subdivision will enhance that.
Yes.
So that's a proper public purpose for granting variances. And I will also say, and I think Ed, you may want to answer this, but one of the variances is so minor, it's really de minimis, and that's the minimal lot. 100 feet is required, and it's 99.7. That variance is very minor, to be almost de minimis. Obviously, the borough requested it, so we should be looking at granting it. So these variances are mainly existing conditions. They're not generated for subdivision. The fact is, the main lot doesn't have frontage or width on the street. It's got only that aspect.
That's the flag lot.
That's the flag hole.
Flag hole.
Right.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
How you doing? John Caruso, 24 Gravelly Point Road. I'm on these Little Johns, some local developer from town. A question, when the town started negotiating with these people, were there appraisals done, conflicting appraisals done on the properties? To see, like you said, we have leverage at this point. Were there any appraisals done beforehand to start this process?
I can see it's the board on our end.
I can.
So, yes, the property owner approached us with an appraisal. The tax assessor then examined the property, negotiated for a much higher value than the appraised value they placed on the property, resulted in the 20,000. Are we privy to any other information? Do we know what those numbers are? It's a public record. I'm asking you now, and we know now. Can you tell us what that information is? I understand. Yes, I just said $20,000 was the agreed upon value of lots. No, one of the smaller lots. One of the smaller lots. Proposed lot 3.03. 3.03. So you guys, so so you're only going to use one lot, but the other lots, do we have an appraisal on the other lots of what they're going to be worth? Not yet. Not yet. So you're saying those?
All of those will be required during the public portion of the tax. They will look at, they have to establish their market. Yeah.
How do we come up with fair market value? And was there any kind of notice beforehand? I mean, when you go into a position to buy a house, you want to know what it's worth, and you want to go in with some kind of leg. You know, if we should do our own appraisal, I'm gathering, and then have something conflicting, and the town assessor did review it, did come up with his own opinion of value, and that's where our negotiation came from. And it will do the same process on the sale with the other lot that it is. Okay. Another question is, I was a little confused before when you said that this property was only really good to this guy next door because it's the odd size lot, and that's why the offer would be to the guy with the odd size lot. Is this going to be how the precedent is if there's some other lot like this?
Zoning standards on there. Every zoning application standards on there. We don't base one prior zoning application on another. They're separate, independent, everything.
Okay, so but you couldn't use that as something else. You could say, hey, listen, we gave it to this guy, and it was a similar situation. So, okay.
If you have a bigger sign, I want a bigger sign than it doesn't matter. Any case standards on,
Okay, fair enough.
Brand new.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, Joe, the facts.
Hi, folks. Monty Tyler, 39 Coast Drive.
Spell your last name,
No,
please, for the record.
KIEL1. So I just heard something that kind of like blew me away. The owner,
Give it as a question.
it is.
Okay.
The owner went to you with the number and your assessor agreed to that number? And you guys aren't doing a separate appraisal? Because that's what I heard.
You misheard. Okay, the owner approached us with an appraisal.
Yeah.
We rejected that value. Okay. So did his own opinion of value, negotiated the value up to $20,000.
Okay, so the tax assessor is doing the appraisal? You have an appraisal company. How come we're not using the appraisal company? And this is waterfront property, like getting close to it, and I understand it's a contiguous owner and you want to get things squared away, but we're giving too much stuff away in this
I
town.
think, sir, this board's responsibility is to do the subdivision or not. The prices and that negotiating is on to the council.
So why was it even brought up here?
I think the question was asked.
I'm asking the same question.
I know, but I hear you.
I got a question.
It's not our responsibility. It's a different office level. Any other questions? Do you want to answer? Do any of the board members have a question?
Sorry. The net of this is to create a space where the town is going to apply for grants and use it for public space. I mean, that's the point of this, correct?
We have council answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, correct. So we can't do anything with government grant because part of this piece of this are owned by the town. Or there's structures on it.
The encroachments prevent it from being listed on the ROSI, which is the Recreation and Open Space Inventory maintained by DEP. And it's that designation which allows the town to pursue grants, among other things, parkland funding under the DEP regulations, all sorts of options. And it also allows for protection of this property as preserved recreation and open space.
So if this was solar, they could be able to use it, it's only like waterfront.
That whole piece is proposed to be designated as recreation and open space. Yep.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, any questions to the audience? I'm going to close the question point. Maybe the audience wants to make a statement. This will be the time to do it. Can I get a second name and address, please?
My name is Robert Monk, 338 Shore Drive. I'm still not clear on the easement part of it, this 10-foot perimeter, where that's coming from. I guess I read that agreement between the owner and the Navigant Partners Association years ago, while the borough was leasing the property, and then there was an easement given while the borough was leasing the property. I don't understand where that 10-foot of the whole thing came around. It doesn't really appear that it's in that agreement. I think that should be looked into further. And I don't think that it should be given up as far as, I think we should maintain that, whether it's a road or a way. Right now it's a way, it's sort of borough property that's being used, as a parking lot. So, I just think that it should be looked at further, as far as, here's, I know the borough doesn't really have plans, so how do we know what they're going to apply for grants? Maybe they want to sell the property, or so what do the grants have to do with it when we don't even know what they want to do with the property? The borough didn't say what they want to do with the property. They just came to us with, as you were saying, it's just subdivide it. So we don't really know what the borough is doing as far as subdivide or getting grant money. Right, we don't know. We don't know. I mean, it's a little strange that one property owner was charged $20,000, but I didn't even see that anywhere in any of the documents. One property owner.
I think, sir, that these are questions that we answer at the council level. That we have to open.
Okay, well, I'm just making my statement there that we're saying that we're talking about grant monies and stuff. We can't proceed with grant monies when we don't even know if they're going with grant, if that's what the route they're going with. Maybe the borough wants to sell it. We don't know that. No peace. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure the board does either, but thank you.
If I may just briefly add, we made it abundantly clear. It's being listed on Rossi, being preserved as recreation and open space land. The borough's not selling the property, the borough's maintaining it for those purposes. In theory, there are procedures for diversion of Rossi property. In practice, it's next to impossible. It requires extensive payments, extensive exchanges of other parkland. It makes it really impractical. That's correct. Yeah.
Anybody else in the audience have any statements they want to make? Okay. Steve Billy, just looking for folks above the force for a vote on Saturdays now.
Sure. So the application is seeking approval of a major subdivision as set forth in Ed Herman's report. The variances that are needed are for lot 301, minimum lot frontage of 10, where 100 feet is required, and that same property, 99.77 feet of width, where 100 feet is, that's the minimum. The other variances are for property 303, and this is the new portion of the lot, the small 3 lots, these variances. One is 10 feet, where 100-foot frontage is required, only has 10 feet. 35 feet width, where 100 feet is necessary, and then a third variance for lot deck, which is at 51.37 feet, where 150 feet is required. And council, is there any other variances I have?
I believe we covered it. I'm also looking at Ben to confirm. Minimum lot size.
Minimum lot area.
I didn't know it, I did, they're all.
Oh, they're all on the side, that's right, but they're very small. So, lot 202 is proposed at 1836, 1,836 square feet. The proposed lot 303 is, one.
Council, I should start that, council, there is no longer.
Okay. Okay, that's right, I'm sorry.
By
Right.
face, it would seem like that should be a variance, but there is no lot, area size standard.
Okay, and that's because
I was asking myself why.
the waterfront is WC zone. Okay, I'm sorry, so we're gonna take those last two things off. They are small lot sizes, 1,800 approximately square feet, two of them, and I think the
Okay, there's a motion to approve the application.
Is there?
I'm offered,
Okay.
thanks. Okay, great, roll call.
Chief Burton,
Yes.
Mr. Kutosh,
Yes.
Ms. LaRussa, Mr. Montecalvo,
Yes.
Mr. Zill, Vice Chair Tierney,
Yes.
Chair Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Kramer,
Yes.
and Ms. Peterson.
Yeah.
Motion passes.
Thank you all.
I don't know. It's never happened before.
5 minutes.
The flavor too, but yeah.
Just the right number.
Okay.
I see it. My friend Anne is sitting in the audience over there.
I don't want to forget.
Thank you.
Just wait for a couple more members. Okay, we're resuming our meeting. Roll call, please.
Mayor Breon?
You should probably pronounce it.
She's recused, well, she's ineligible. She's ineligible. Chief Burton? Mr. Kutosh?
Yeah.
Ms. LaRussa? Mr. Montecalvo has recused himself. Council Member Olszewski is ineligible. Mr. Zill?
Here.
Vice Chair Tierney?
Here.
Chair Knox?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Ms. Peterson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, next up is conditional use, LUB 2022-0, One seagrass.
Hi, John Anderson on behalf of the applicant, Seagrass, New Jersey, LLC. I'm with the law firm of Foss, Sam, Filippo, and Milne. Has the board secretary and board attorney reviewed service on the matter?
Yes, I reviewed the service of the notice as to both properties in this, application, and I found no discrepancies or issues.
With the exception of Mr. Montecalvo, who's recused himself this evening, and the Class 1 and Class 3 members who are ineligible to vote, are there any members of the board who have a impermissible conflict of interest that would prevent them from hearing and impartially deciding the matter?
What is your,
We're looking in the event of conflict that's direct pecuniary interest, indirect pecuniary interest, direct personal interest, or indirect personal interest.
well, I believe that Mr. Montecalvo, was received already, and I'm not aware of any other reason why the members currently sitting here could not vote in this matter.
Thank you.
The next question. Were any members here eligible to vote service letter? They didn't request certain flexibility of this application for a fee? Are you seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you. This application involves two separate properties. This is going to be very important. One is 272 Bay Avenue, block 72, lot 12. It's the property upon which the Chilongo's restaurant is located, corner of Bay Avenue and Seagrass. The second is what's referred to as Sea Drift Avenue, and it's a standalone permitted conditional use surface parking lot. It's across the street. It's also a corner lot. It's block 73, lot 2. Both are located near CBD zone. As I said, both are corner lots. 272 Bay is the restaurant and bar. It also has an apartment on the second story now. And then Sea Drift Avenue is just the surface parking lot. Services the restaurant and bar. What the applicant's proposing to do, of course the applicant is a contract purchaser, if that wasn't clear from the application. They'd be proposing to take 272 Bay Avenue and change the use from a restaurant, bar, and apartment to a conditionally permitted cannabis retailer. And so your ordinance permits cannabis retailers in the CBD zone where we are located, and it has two main conditions involving proximity to a school and impermissibility of having like on-site consumption, whether indoor or outdoor. We're not going to be having any on-site consumption, and the lot was surveyed, and it's 1,050 feet from the nearest school, so it is over the 1,000-foot requirement. So the thing that we're going to be looking at on that conditionally permitted cannabis retailer is some minor deviations from your design criteria. Those are existing conditions, but they get kind of pulled in, elevated from being design criteria to standards as a D3 conditional use variance for the cannabis retailer. Going back to the parking lot, it also requires a D3 variance. In that case, the parking lot likewise does not comply 100% with your design criteria. So again, you have an ordinance that elevates what would otherwise be a design waiver for an existing condition and makes it into a D3 variance. So ultimately, the relief taking sounds quite a bit more serious than what's really the case, because we're not doing anything to exacerbate any of these existing conditions. They exist. In most cases, they're proposed to be improved upon rather than exacerbated in any way. There's one other issue involving the parking lot that I want to forecast. Your ordinance has a proximity restriction for cannabis retailers. There's no proximity restriction for a standalone parking lot as far as where it could be located vis-a-vis a school. And this is a principal standalone parking lot. The ordinance permits principal standalone parking lots in the zone, and they're allowed to service other permitted uses and other conditionally permitted uses. Moreover, your ordinance does not allow accessory use or accessory structure on a lot that doesn't have a principal use. So there's no way that this parking lot could be conceived as accessory to the building across the street. They're not contiguous lots. They don't border on one another. It's not accessory. It's a separate use. So what we've done is we've alleged and substantiated through the ordinance that the 1,000-foot requirement is completely inapplicable when it comes to the parking lot, is applicable when it comes to the cannabis retailer, but we don't violate the rule because we're more than 1,000 feet away. So what we're really going to be talking to you about when it comes to the Longo's restaurant property is going to be things like a rear setback, a side setback, building coverages, and floor area ratio. And as it stands, all those things are moderately deficient. None of them are getting any worse, and 3 of them are improving. So what we'll be doing, among other things, is removing a walk-in refrigerator with that restaurant, which brings down our floor area ratio, so we're improving that condition. By removing that walk-in cooler, we're also improving our rear setback, which is presently 2 feet. We're going to go to 10 feet, where 12 is required. So again, we're improving upon a condition. And coverages, we're going from 80-some-odd% down to 77.9, a hair under, again, as a result of the removal of the walk-in box. So we will be seeking 2 D3 variances, 1 per lot. We'll talk to you about design criteria. When it comes to the Chilongo's restaurant, some of the other design criteria we're going to talk about briefly is going to have to do with landscaping, as well as the width of the proposed loading zone. Presently, there is no loading zone on site. They handle all the deliveries on the street. That's pretty undesirable, I think, from the borough's perspective, and just in terms of traffic flows and the neighbors. We're going to bring a loading zone on site. It's a small loading zone. You're required to have a 15-foot driveway. We've got a 10-foot driveway that widens out to over 11 feet. But what our testimony is going to be, it's only going to receive Sprinter vans. And so in that regard, it's going to be adequate to keep those Sprinter vans off the street, handle all deliveries there. So we don't believe that that design deviation is anything that merits much discussion, and it can be granted, the D3 can be granted. Likewise with the landscaping, we're at 100% coverage presently. We're proposed to remain at 100% coverage. There's no practical way to get any landscaping on the property. If you were going to do something, it would be in the rear of the lot where our garbage and everything would be, where our loading zone is going to be, and it wouldn't be appreciated from the Bay Avenue frontage. What we're proposing to do is to do some more ample landscaping around the parking lot, where it will be seen from 2 street frontages, Bay Avenue and Cedar. What you're going to hear from our professionals this evening is that these design deviations are minor, de minimis, in many cases existing, in other cases improving, and that you should be able to grant the D3 variances for the conditionally permitted cannabis retailer and the conditionally permitted parking lot with confidence, because the sites will accommodate these uses despite the deviation. We'll also be giving you testimony as to why there are no appreciable detriments associated with either the parking lot use or the condition in the cannabis retailer use. We've got 5 witnesses. We try to keep most of the testimony fairly brief. We'll cover operations, architecture, engineering, traffic engineering, and planning. We'll take them in that order. I want to pre-mark some exhibits to expedite the presentation if it suits the board. In discussion with the board attorney, there's always a question as to whether to mark the exhibit package. I think a fair compromise might be to mark the entire submission package as just A1 rather than marking it all individually. That would be everything that was submitted previously by the applicant, the development permit, the intent to proceed, the narrative of development, owner's consent, the original site plan, the original interior renovations, a cannabis regulatory commission final agency decision, and a resolution in support of the cannabis establishment from the mayor and council. As A2, I would mark a traffic and engineering parking evaluation prepared by Mr. Lee Klein, dated January the 27th of 2023. A3 will do a colorized rendering that's on the easel in front of the board, prepared by East Point Engineering LLC, last revised to January the 23rd of 2023. A4, we will do a photo board, photographs of 272 Bay Avenue. A5, a photo board, photographs of Cedar Avenue. And A6 will do colorized elevations. I don't have the precise date, but when my architect speaks to it, they can give you the date of the colorized elevations. Without further ado, I would swear my first witness, Mr. Jim Whalen.
Your full name and the here.
James Whalen and Seagrass, New Jersey, LLC.
Sorry, what was your title?
One deal.
On behalf of the entity.
Whalen, would you explain to the board really briefly what types of products will be sold at the dispensary?
Flour, edibles, t-shirts, papers, bowls.
Can't hear you. Yeah, we need to hear better than that.
Sure.
What's your microphone?
Flour, tincture, edibles, papers, bowls. Will any of the products be visible from the exterior of the site?
No, none of the products will be visible. Any windows will have to be opaque so that nothing can be seen inside.
Will there be any advertising on the exterior of the building with regard to the products that you're offering inside?
There will be no advertising.
Do you sell tobacco or alcohol?
No.
Will any of the products that you are selling be in tamper-resistant containers and packaging that confines odor to the interior of the package?
That is how all the products will be received to us, pre-packaged in odor-proof and tamper-proof containers.
To avoid any unfortunate mistakes in the home, is the packaging likewise designed to be unappealing to children?
Unappealing to children and hard to open even for some adults.
Are there restrictions on who can purchase the products?
You have to be 21 years of age to purchase it, or older.
Previously made a statement that there'll be no on-site consumption of the product. Can you confirm the accuracy of that statement?
As of right now, Highlands does not have any ordinance to have any smoking or anything on-site or outside.
Retail things only, right?
Retail sales only.
No manufacturing, no cultivation.
That is correct, no.
Would you state for the board your hours of operation?
10 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and 10 to 5 on Sundays following the ordinance.
So that's the ordinance requirements will be complied with in all regards of operation?
That is correct.
How many people do you anticipate you'll employ?
At one time, 5 to 8 people in the store, including security.
Will you, wherever possible, attempt to hire local?
That is our intention, to keep down the traffic, the parking, and in order to have Highlands people employed in this town.
Where do you intend to receive deliveries on site?
According to our site plan that we're proposing, deliveries to be made in the back of the building. The Sprinter van would enter the back, and then we have a side door that security would escort the deliveries in.
How frequently do you anticipate receiving deliveries?
That is going to, depending on the volume, but I'd say about 3 times a week.
Are there any operational details that you want to share with the board regarding how the deliveries come or how long the delivery takes?
Deliveries in from the Sprinter van are relatively quick. They'll average about 6 containers per delivery from the Sprinter van, and they will be brought directly inside, and they will be, that'll take about 5 minutes, and then it has to go through the register, check in the invoice to make sure that everything that was brought in matches the ticket.
All right. For refuse, will your refuse privately hauled on site?
Yes, all refuse will be off-site. Is allowed, permitted to be, will be
something that I was thinking of just when we started talking on this application was you get a lot of cardboard boxes. You mentioned coming in with the product. There are cardboard boxes, cut up, stacked, stored, and you pick up. Can you
you speak to that issue?
Most of our product comes not in cardboard boxes, but should we have them, we will have a dumpster refuse area which will be have the cardboard in. You described in the past to me that some of the deliveries come in like a beauty plastic bin that's unloaded, and the driver takes that bin back with them for reuse. Is that accurate?
That is correct. That's how the transfer is done.
In terms of your refuse, will it be discreetly stored when it's awaiting pickup?
So our refuse will be in a trash can and a recycling can behind a gate according to our site plan, and then we will bring it out for the private pickup.
You'll take care to make sure that the garbage is not placed at the curb too long or it doesn't stay out there for extended periods of time?
That is correct, on pickup days.
Would you speak to any of the security precautions that you're going to put in place with regard to these?
So the CRC has a very high standard for what the security issues are. We've have a company, security company, who has done our security overlay, and they will have cameras tied into the police. It will be 24 hours monitored outside of the police by our own security, by the security company that we hire, and we will have an on-site security guard at all times while the location is open.
Something that I think comes to people's mind a lot with these uses is, are you going to have large queues of people waiting outside of the site to gain access to purchase the product? Would you speak to how you're going to avoid the queuing aspect of the?
Sure, that's very much a concern of ours, understanding what the percentage, the perception is of a cannabis dispensary. We have a waiting area that can have 15 to 18 people inside, and then we were going to be implementing a similar texting service that restaurants have. So if you come in, you receive a text message, or you could give your phone, you'll receive a text message when your spot in line opens up, and we'll have, so no loitering happens outside the building.
Will you accept pre-orders online that you can schedule pickup times for folks as well?
There will be discounts to those to help keep the pickups and the ordering online.
Some ability on your part to control the times that people come to the site and spread them out to off hours.
Correct.
Just wanted to speak that the issue arose, I think, in one of the review memorandums regarding odor. We addressed it briefly, but is it your testimony that the product, once in the package and received at the store, did not have an appreciable odor?
That is correct, and we will still have carbon filters on our HVAC system.
Addressing any concerns that there might be nighttime activity, the latest you'd be open at any time would be 7 o'clock, is that right?
We'd be closing at 7 p.m., that's correct.
And other than some required security lighting and things of that nature, would you make sure that all the lights in the parking lot on the building are placed on timers so as not to create a nuisance for the residential neighbors?
That is correct, they'll be on a time clock.
I don't have any further questions of this witness, but I'd invite the board and their professionals to ask him.
Get your product in, how is it secured inside the building? You know, the stuff that's not sold or you don't have already sold.
So there'll be a vault inside the building that it's CRC regulated, so everything has to be in the vault. So once
no display cases where you go and say, if you how it is or something.
Correct. Yeah, we're not allowed to show any product on the floor.
That actually raised a good secondary question, the pound of this. Is there a quantity limitation on what can be purchased by any one person?
The maximum amount is 1 ounce.
Just in terms of keeping people's visits moderate, they can't stay all day and pick more and more and more.
I have a question for you, sir. What is the background of Seagrass, New Jersey? Is this a corporation? Is this just your first location? What's been your experience? It's just something you've been doing this for a while.
So, my background is an entrepreneur. I have many businesses, construction, restaurants in Asbury Park. Nick, my partner, and I own Melonhead Cafe, or Health Cafe.
Seagrass is another entrepreneur company that we've started with, assistance for consultants.
Okay, so Seagrass is a standalone, or?
It's no, as of now, this will be the first one.
Okay. This is your first venture into the cannabis business?
This is correct. It's a good question. We did have a consultant who was going to be with us this evening. They could provide any supplemental testimony to answer the question. Unfortunately, I think she had a health issue and was not able to join, but she is part of the team. And my understanding, and Mr. Whalen can confirm it, is that she will assist to get the business, from the concept stage to implementation, and she will have an ongoing role then with things like compliance, regulatory compliance with the CRC and the like. Is that right, Mr. Whalen? That is correct.
I guess we could, while we're talking about this, maybe you like, I know you, maybe you like the board and some of our audience. Your conditional license is for New Jersey. Is it specific to Monmouth County?
No, it's for New Jersey.
Okay. Is this the only location you're currently looking at?
That is correct.
But in theory, you can go to another town or another municipality that allows cannabis?
I believe that's correct.
I have a question. Regarding the parking lot that's currently owned under, I believe, Chilanga's, that's being spun off under a different name. Hypothetical. It's being spun off in a different name. If that parking lot was under Seagrass, like it is under Chilanga's, would that violate the proximity of the school zone?
No, I don't believe so, because it's still a standalone lot.
Well, but believe and...
Okay. It would not, to say it more confidently, because the lots don't merge, right? So you can't merge two lots that are on the opposite side of a 50-foot right-of-way. They're separate standalone lots. I think if you had two side-by-side lots that were undersized, owned by Seagrass, and one of them had a building and one of them had a parking lot on it, they might merge, and if one of those lots that happened to have the parking lot was within 1,000 feet of the school, that might be an issue. When you have two standalone lots on the opposite side of the street, regardless of ownership, your ordinance allows one of them to be just a parking lot, and that parking lot can service other uses that are permitted or conditionally permitted. It's a principal use parking lot. It's not an accessory to the retailer. So for that reason, it does not violate the 1,000.
So are you spinning it off to a different name just for the beneficial of the community?
No, I would advise all of my clients, whenever they're purchasing multiple properties, to take title in different entities. It's very commonplace in the legal world for other reasons involving liability, motor title, things like that. The way we would envision it here, frankly, probably neither one of these properties would actually be owned by Seagrass. There is a contract in place, but there's a right to assign it to related entities. So more likely than not, there's going to be separate entities that own each of the properties with a lease between Seagrass and the parking lot, allowing them to use it for parking, which may be in fact required by your ordinance. And Seagrass would probably be leasing the retail space as well from a separate owner that owns that one. So if you can envision three entities, all with the same principles, one owning each of the lots, one operating the business with a lease between the operator and the parking lot owning entity. Probably.
So is this a purchase for the property, or is this a lease agreement for the property?
So at the core of it, it would be a purchase. They're contract purchasers, so they're intending to acquire the Chilangos property, and they're intending to acquire the property.
How about the property next door?
That is part and parcel of the purchase. It's not proposed for any kind of development right now. But what I could tell you is that in discussions with my client, they've been more than willing to make a stipulation that if they are approved, if they are able to get the one and only one license in town, even though they're not proposing to use that for cannabis or anything else, they would ensure that any trailers associated with the restaurant, things like that, are removed from the site, and they would be able to clean it up, seed the lot, maybe do a little bit of landscaping to beautify it. But it's not part of this application. There's nothing pending. There's no development plan for it.
Okay, well, this Randall's current property, as you know, is adjacent to the empty lot. So would that be treated as one property, or are you talking about that being two separate properties, two separate entities?
So that would also be a separate property owned by a third entity. Right now, the way it is, Lino Cervantes owns the corner lot that Chilangos is on, and he has an LLC called Naked Tamales LLC that owns the neighboring lot that's adjacent. And I suspect that was done to keep those two lots from merging if there was ever any suggestion that they might. Lino also owns the parking lot, the surface parking lot in his own name, but he's able to do that because they're not contiguous. They don't border on one another. They can't merge.
Right, your proposal is to do the same, basically. 3 lots or 2 lots?
Keep it 3 lots, all separate owners, leases to Seagrass, that would be the operator, and then a lease between Seagrass and the parking lot owning it.
Yeah, as a purchase, you're buying all.
Yes. Yeah.
And if, of course, it's okay.
Yeah.
If I can just chime in 2 things. Number one, I think that, the board should know, like, just about every restaurant now, the liquor license is one LLC, a building is another LLC, and a restaurant is a third LLC. It happens all the time. It's not uncommon. Sure. And then secondly, I just wanted to ask Mr. Herman if he agrees with the representation of the parking lot with regards to our zoning and our ordinance. The 1,000-foot requirement, yes.
For the parking lot.
For the parking lot.
Yeah, council and I had discussed that, Mr. Cachero and I had discussed that as well. We felt like that was an accurate representation. And just for the record, the distance from the closest point of that parking lot to the elementary school is probably about 998 feet. So it's literally within several feet of that 1,000-foot. So even if it were to be considered, I think it would be de minimis enough to where it would be of no real relevance or consequence to the application as it stands. But the fact that it is a separate parking lot, I think I agree with the representation made here.
Do the board members have any questions? Carry on, sir.
Okay, I will have my second witness sworn. It's Mr. Al Shishayas. Yeah, yep, exactly.
I think my history still helps you guys with these pronouns.
Yes.
Your full name, spell your last name?
Sure. It's Al Shishayas. Last name spelled Shissias.
Are you, a company or
My own business. Shishayas Design and Development. Yeah, licensed architect and landscape architect in the state of New Jersey.
If you could tell us about your education.
Sure. Yeah, undergraduate at Rutgers, graduate degree from NJIT, licensed architect since 2013, landscape architect 2014. Served on zoning and planning boards myself, presented in front of Variety, not in front of Highlands, throughout Monmouth County. So, to give a couple of representative boards you may have presented in front of. Sure. Middletown, Fairhaven, Munson, Little Silver, Colts Neck, Keyport, Neptune, mostly Monmouth County. Mm-hmm. Mr. Shishayas, are you familiar with the subject property? Yes. You prepared the plans dated January the 25th, 2023, and consisting of 3 sheets, right?
Yes.
Okay. And they were marked into evidence as part of the application package as A1. Would you, I'm going to give you this poster board. You take it up to the easel, and would you talk to the board about the existing building that Chilangos is located in?
I would also recommend too, if you could show us and then possibly show the audience. Sure.
Yeah. We may have some reduced copies that we can circulate around. And then yeah, I do. I think we previously marked that one into evidence for identification purposes, and I had that as. Bear with me a second. Yeah. So the photo board that I marked into evidence was A4. And then Mr. Shishayas is also going to pass around what's been marked as A6, a colorized elevation. We'll try to circulate it to the audience as well as the board.
Please make sure the secretary gets a copy of these.
Sorry. We will make sure that she does, and anything that we miss, she will get an email copy tomorrow morning.
For the record, the public board appears to have 1, 2, 3, 7 photographs, which the witness, I guess, is going to describe. You want to turn that board around to the public?
Sure. Permanently or?
Did you say you were giving the public board to the record?
We're passing around like reduced copies that maybe the audience can look at and pass to their neighbor. There's not enough for everybody. It's quite a turnout, but just so that they can see it.
But you turn these all around.
Yeah. Same with your architectural plans?
Why don't you orient the board to the board? Mr. Shishinas, would you review for the board and for the audience the existing building at 272 Bay Avenue, please? You can utilize them to supplement your testimony however you like.
Yeah, so I'll go over the existing building start. I think most people are very familiar with this corner lot, Bay Ave and Seacrest, and the existing two-story building. The second floor is now a full floor. The existing first floor is a Salongo's restaurant and bar. The second floor is a two-bedroom apartment. Again, it doesn't cover the entirety of the first floor, so there's a portion of the rear building that's got, equipment and things like that. As far as the existing floor plans,
Thank you. Is that on? Okay.
For the first floor, the existing vestibule that enters into Salongo, we're going to remove that and we're going to expand it. I'll go into that when I go into the proposed plans. We're going to open up what's right now kind of a glassed-in seating area for the restaurant into the rest of the space. We're going to remove the bar as well as 2 existing restrooms. And as noted before, we're going to be removing the walk-in freezer in the rear of the lot. There's also some existing restaurant equipment, related equipment that we're going to be removing. The second floor, again, currently a 2-bedroom apartment. We're going to be removing the bedrooms. We're going to be renovating the kitchen and bathroom for office use. So that covers the existing. For the proposed plans, I'll start on the second floor. This is going to mostly be administrative. There's 2 offices replacing where the 2 bedrooms were that face Bay Ave. The rest of the space is going to be conference kind of work type space. They're going to renovate the kitchen as well as the existing bathroom. And there's going to be some storage space to remain as is.
Mr. Shishinas, that will be office space and kitchen and conference space for the use below, not for some independent office that it would be rented to or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. So I think more importantly, the first floor, starting at the entry off of Bay Ave, the existing vestibule that you currently enter in the restaurant, that's going to be removed and kind of expanded in order to provide an ADA ramp, and that's going to be how you actually enter the business. That's going to come in off of Bay Ave fairly significantly to where it is currently right now. As noted before by the applicant, the front area that's glassed in is going to be where the waiting area is, again, in order to keep any waiting. What's right now the primary restaurant bar space is really where the retail is going to be. That's going to have display and counter space. And again, what I understand, that's not actually the display of goods for sale or the cannabis products, but it'll be more display for other items that might be for sale. We're going to still keep one restroom, and that's going to be ADA compliant. The rear of the building is going to be for packing and receiving, and there's going to be the vault that was previously described in the rear of the building. But again, we're going to be removing the refrigerator box that's back there. That's not part of that. And the doors on the side, there's going to be 1 or 2 doors, depending on final code review for egress and things like that. So the exterior of the building, we're really planning to do a significant upgrade and really clean up a lot of what's going on there right now. Patch, repair, any of the issues with the stucco. Going to go with a more muted color tone that you can see by this rendering.
Is that A3 that you're referencing? Oh, so, I'm sorry. Is that A6 that you're referencing?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Colorizing elevation.
Yep.
And does it have a date? I didn't have a date on it.
It does not.
Okay, undated colorized elevation.
So in addition to patching, repairing, and cleaning the existing stucco, the Seagrass logo is going to go on the bay hat. That will comply with any signage requirements. There's a 15% maximum. Measuring this in kind of the most conservative way, it'd be at most 11%. You could argue it'd be less than that. Any of the awnings are going to get replaced and upgraded. We're going to add some architectural detailing, some wood paneling up along the front. And the applicant is interested, if the community and the municipality is interested, as well as doing some sort of mural along here, possibly with a local artist, if that's what the town would like. But again, it's overall going to be more muted than Toronto is right now. I think that's all I have.
Okay, we said signage is compliant, right?
Yep.
And let's see, the existing building, is that ADA compliant?
No.
And you're proposing to make it ADA compliant?
Yes. Entry and bathroom.
And in my opening remarks, I talked briefly about some of these existing setback and coverage issues. Can you confirm that the existing side setback of 0.61 feet will not change?
That's correct.
Okay. Am I correct that the rear setback is improving from 2.1 feet to 10.8 feet?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Are any of the coverages increasing?
No.
Is the floor area ratio increasing?
No.
Okay. That's all I have for this witness, but I invite the board and their professionals to ask any questions they may have.
Do you bring any access from the store? Yes, do you want to do everything from the outside?
They're going to use, right now, there's a separate staircase that gives access to the 2-bedroom apartment. That's going to get opened up internally. So the stairs basically going to remain as is, but the access to the offices is presumably going to be, it can be accessed from within the building. And that's presumably how it'll be done. Exactly. Yep, correct.
I have a question. The front of the building, it doesn't look like it's going to change with the glass or, plexiglass enclosure that's out there.
Yes.
And it was stated earlier that you can't see through the windows, so what do you plan on doing? Blacking that out? With that, why wouldn't we spruce this up?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we use new building materials? Make that nicer, beautify that. That's retaining wall block out there. Why not frame that out? Use the same stucco with the siding,
yeah,
and make it nice, same color.
Yeah, I would say, the blocking is either going to get replaced or at least covered up, so you're not going to see the blocking anymore.
There's no heat out there.
Yeah, that's
Well, I'm not trying to knock Leo in any way. I mean, those are the materials that we used at the time, but there's new materials out there. You could, if you're going to black out those windows, it's going to look terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
So make it nice.
Yeah, got it.
Black out the windows in the central business district if it's part of a redevelopment plan? You can't black out windows on Bay Avenue, right?
Well, I know the occur about same difference.
Like, this redevelopment plan requires
Right,
windows.
they're going to open up the second part. People are going to wait in there.
So there's just like a little huddle room
Correct.
that is gonna be dark.
Yeah, I'd like to understand, are you proposing to him black out the windows?
We would do something that would obscure any visibility through. The thought was that it would be maintained at this point, but the applicant's fully open to other ideas as to what might improve it or what might be preferred by the board or.
And I think the desire to,
There's also some regulations on COC, state COC on how the exterior can be.
Okay.
I'm not, the regulations are, 5 inches paper. But, yeah, I know. But, so you have to find the condition here. You're gonna have to follow what the state requirements are. So I think the state is pretty much activist about, they don't want, signage, that is, disruptive to the communities, and I think the opaqueness of the windows is something that they measure.
So it's signage that's not, that just means even though the logo is clearly target oriented, that would be included?
I'm not certain about how far they can go with the logo. I mean, obviously, it looks like around 1/8 like that. 1/8. Yeah, I mean, what they don't want is, they have to comply with our signage, first of all. So sizing, and they said they're going to be compliant.
That will be fine.
Yeah, right, and if there is a regulation with CRC, you're gonna have to meet that too. So this probably has.
Right.
They have
I
to-
just almost see, put a paint flat on it, and like, okay, let's all come. Right, let's make this nice.
Yeah, that's the, to operate the appearance of the whole building.
Commit so as part of a resolution, so you need to be prepared to tell us what you're willing to do and put it on the record.
I guess it's also, those boards have exposed to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
You can't say, we'll make it blue or green or yellow, whatever. It's the applicant's responsibility to come in here, with thorough plans, so we have a question to answer.
Yeah.
And a big one is, how's it gonna look?
Yeah, no, I get that.
And it just looks like it does now when you have the color paint,
Exactly, right.
which is not, it's great, you might as well just get it out to the grass out in the park and could you speak up, please? I'm sorry. Sorry. I said, because you've got the whole place, you might as well extend it into that little vestibule you've got that really like you blow on it and fall over, and you make it part of the building and you make it pretty.
Yeah.
I think, Mr. Burton also, part of this, heat.
Yeah.
And, down here, we get some cold days.
Yeah.
When it comes down, we have,
Especially if you're gonna open that front up, so now you can really.
I'm looking for my client, Mr. Whalen, who I know as one of his other businesses, his main business, is a very complex contractor. He's done work on me and my family on many occasions in the Red Bank area and done a fine job on Broad Street. And he's telling me that he would certainly be amenable to doing just what the board's talking about to make that seemingly more permanent and match in terms of materials with the remainder of the building, similar colors and the like.
So, Mr. Chair, one way they do that as to get sense of comments. Not that they have to come back with all revised plans, but there would be a condition that would require them to do trees something that would be acceptable to the borough engineer or the board engineer, and take into consideration. Unless you really want to get specific, and you want them to show you, color swatches or something.
Well, I think they already have.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at it.
Yeah.
So I guess this board has to determine if this is what we're looking for as a town.
Right, I'm just thinking, like, we just adopted a new redevelopment plan that has very specific design criteria.
Correct.
Some of this is
That covers this.
absolutely covers this building. So I thought,
So we are definitely in the redevelopment zone. I think at the TRC there was some discussion as to whether we'd be governed by the redevelopment plan or whether we'd be governed by
the ordinance at large. We've elected to be governed by the ordinance at large because under the redevelopment plan, you can't get any type of fee variance, so we wouldn't be before you guys, you wouldn't have jurisdiction. That being said, we're cognizant of the fact of the way we're trying to evolve and what their goals are in terms of improving that stretch of the town and all the CBD. And I think we're willing to work collaboratively to achieve that effect on Day Avenue.
Good. Any other questions from the board members?
How many customers do you expect to have in there at any one time? Or what you say something else?
I mean, you could speak to capacity if that partially answers the question.
I think we'd be, maximum capacity would probably likely be somewhere around 50, but that's not what we're anticipating. Right now. I would say a max of 30. Architecturally, it could be more, but that's not what the applicant's plan.
That's with 15 to 18% living area.
Yes.
So 15 actually active counters and 15% of the waiting area.
You'd have to give an allowance for employees as well. Correct.
And how do you preclude people from queuing up in front of the building? You said that you're going to do different, again, this is maybe not for the architect, so I can ask the
So if it pleases the board, we could place discrete signage, basically no loitering. We would not have a queue that we would direct. We have security, so they would actively discourage that type of behavior and other behaviors, such as coming into the waiting room, waiting in your vehicle, enjoying the town while you're waiting, scheduling an online order so that you come to pick it up at an off time. All those types of things would be implemented to avoid the queuing. We understand it's important to the board.
Maybe actually, separated up the line.
Yeah, because we know that that's happening with other establishments in Monmouth County, and we absolutely want to make sure that that's not the look and feel of the avenue. It's for people picking up the sidewalk or the edges of it.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits. We want to be ADA compliant, we probably have to be as well, but that's part of the benefit of kind of projecting into the building off the street. So even though technically that's exterior, it's really interior of the building. So that'll help alleviate that issue as well.
Any questions? Any other local witnesses?
I would certainly have other witnesses. Call Mr. Poppy, Brent Poppy, the engineer. Okay, testing. Mr. Poppy, I'm being cautioned that 10 o'clock is the cutoff this evening, and we have a pre-packed house this evening where folks may want to make some comments. So I'll encourage you to keep your remarks brief, but would you, once you're sworn, would you just immediately run into your credentials, please?
Yes, I'll do my best. I'm going to hand out. This is just a copy of the exhibit.
I did.
Glenn Pappy, P-A-P-I. Mr. Pappy, was that exhibit A3 that was marked into the record?
Yes, yes it was.
Then if you just continue on with your credentials, if you would.
I have a bachelor's of science from Rutgers College of Engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing for over 25 years. I'm a certified municipal engineer in the state, and I've testified before various other boards throughout the state, including the city of Long Branch, Red Bank, Middletown, Marlboro. Go on over a matter of time.
If it pleases the board, would they accept the witnesses as a professional engineer?
Thank you so much.
Mr. Poppy, of course, you're familiar with the site, is that right?
That's correct. I'm familiar with the subject properties, and among other things, I've studied the design criteria as well as the ordinances of the conditional permitted cannabis retailer and the parking lot as well.
Okay. I'd like you to just immediately zero in on existing conditions specific to each site. And I'm talking about site conditions, like the rear of the property where there's no building and the parking lot itself. Would you walk the board and the audience through that?
Yeah, first, I want to state, the properties at 272 Bay Avenue, Block 72, Lot 12. As it's been mentioned, it's currently developed with a two-story restaurant building. It has an area of 2,300 square feet or 0.0528 acres, with 23 feet of frontage along Bay Avenue and 100 feet of frontage along Cedric Ave. As mentioned before, the existing building covers most of the property from property line to property line, has a footprint area of 1,911 square feet. There's an existing detached walk-in freezer that's going to be removed at the rear. And the entrance to the building is at the corner of Bay Avenue, where there's two side entry doors. The second property is located just across the street, opposite corner. It's known as Block 73, Lot 2. It has an area of 7,000 square feet, 0.607 acres. It currently serves the restaurant as parking with 15 parking spaces, approximately. There's 70 feet of frontage along Bay Avenue, 100 feet along Cedars Avenue, and there's an existing 10 by 10 storage shed on the property, as well as vehicular access directly off of Cedars Avenue via 14-foot wide driveway apron. There's two display signs on the property as well on the parking lot of the property. There's an existing parking sign with the restaurant logo, and as well as a historic borough sign that's on the property along Bay Avenue.
And what is it that the applicant's proposing to do with regard to each of the properties in terms of site work?
So as you can see from the color rendering, which is a depiction of my site plan, sheet 4 of 10, the applicant's proposing to to convert the Lot 12 restaurant to a cannabis dispensary with, as the architect described, new front entry, awnings, neutral color, new front business sign, pedestrian access via ADA ramp at the front entrance, and the removal of the walk-in freezer at the rear. The architect described the plan of the building in a lot of detail, so I'm not going to get into that. The removal of the walk-in freezer at the rear allowed us room for a loading zone. That loading zone is 19 foot by 10.8 foot in dimension. We feel it's adequately sized for a sprinter size delivery truck, and the applicant is also proposing to install a 6-foot high vinyl fence along that property line at the rear for additional screening, the recycling area, and a gate at the front of that recycling area as well. He's proposing all new sidewalks along the entire length of Cedars Avenue, along this side showing gray and plan here, and he's also proposing curbside planters that are shown here at the front along Bay Avenue. The existing gravel parking lot at Lot 2 would be updated with a new 24-foot wide driveway apron. The new concrete perimeter curb around the entire parking lot. New concrete ADA parking space at the parking lot to make it fully accessible. There'd be a concrete apron proposed also in this front driveway entrance to keep the snow not into the parking lot. A very detailed assortment of landscape plantings around the entire perimeter of the parking lot, as well as 2 new bicycle racks that would be proposed, which is consistent with the development zone. The existing raised planting beds that are out at the front of the property along Bay Avenue would be completely reconstructed. Right now they're in very poor condition. They'll be replanted with a variety of ornamental grasses, flowering perennials. There's 5 new shade trees you can see proposed throughout the property. The applicant also proposes at the parking lot side of the property to install a 6-foot high vinyl fence for additional screening, as well as additional plantings in that area, mature plantings that would grow mature about 10 to 12 foot in height. The existing gravel will remain. It's going to be delineated with some painted lines on the curbing for the delaying the parking spaces, as well as a product called Easy Marker, which is little delineators that can put into the gravel that delineate the parking spaces. In response to the board engineer's review comments requesting testimony for lighting levels, I'm offering the following. There are a few existing residential type light fixtures out of the property. There's a floodlight above the existing storage shed. There's several floodlights off the side of the existing building. Facade. None of those lights are LED compliant or IES compliant, which means that they don't provide any full cutoff. They're not dark sky compliant. They're not fully shielded. The proposed site lighting that the applicant's contemplating has a 3-pole mounted LED light fixtures, which will comply with IES standards. You can specify to meet the borough's lighting requirements, chapter 2165.11, as follows. The maximum height of 15 feet will be complied with. The minimum 0.3 foot candles everywhere and the average minimum 0.5 foot candles are complied. There's a 0.66 average foot candle level proposed, and the maximum of half a foot candle at the lot lines will be complied at 0.0 foot candles at the lot line. The proposed lights will also be on a timer. As previously mentioned, the light levels will dim during non-operating hours. The combination of the plantings, skip chart removal, 6-foot fence, mature trees on the property line as they exist today. We will provide ample screening. The building at lot 12 is also proposed to have a little slim wall-mounted light above the doorway to provide for some light for pedestrians, and the applicant would agree to incorporate any additional lighting that the board feels necessary to meet the light level requirements. In response to the board engineer's review comment requesting testimony regarding drainage, the parking lot at lot 2 slopes from east to west, so it basically slopes from this side toward Cedar Avenue. The gradual slope of about from 6 foot to 5.3 foot, and over a existing gravel parking lot. The site does not disturb over an acre of land. It does not increase impervious by more than a quarter acre, so it's not considered major development in regards to the NJC 708, which is the New Jersey State Stormwater Management Rule. I'm trying to speak as fast as I can. The stormwater management measures, therefore, are not required. The applicant has informed that there are no known drainage problems at the property. Currently, drains the same way it would drain in the proposed condition. There's nothing really that would alter the drainage pattern. And in response to the board engineer's review comments pertaining to utilities, I wanted to offer that the building on lot 12 would continue to be served by the existing utilities for water, sewer, gas, and electric. The change in use from a restaurant to the dispensary is actually a reduction in flow. And again, it says that in accordance with NJC 714A 23.3, a 30-seat restaurant would require 35 gallons per day per seat, which winds up being about 1,000 gallons per day, whereas a retail store of this size projected flow would be about 230 gallons per day, which is a 0.1 GPD per square foot. The building has a total square foot of 2,373 square feet. Additionally, the applicant has confirmed the building does not require any new fire service. That's based upon the projected occupancy. And just to mention with regard to the parking requirements, I don't know if that was touched upon, but the off-street, the applicant's requirement is to have 4 off-street parking spaces for business, commercial, retail use. That's 1 space per 600 square feet of gross floor area, whereas he's proposing 17 off-street parking spaces, which is more than compliant with the ordinance.
So, Mr. Poppy, we previously touched upon some of these design waivers that were sort of the trigger for these variances. Starting with the parking lot, would you just review the design waivers? And I think you may have confirmed that there's only one now. Would you review that?
I believe the one design waiver is the setback of 5 feet where I believe 12-foot was required.
And is that for the parking spaces at the, the south side of the lot?
Right, well, I'm running my finger along the side here, along
Any existing condition?
that is existing condition.
Is it proposed to be exacerbated in any way?
No, it's not.
All right, so the only thing that triggers the D3 variance as far as the parking lot is concerned is the location of the existing parking that's not changing, correct?
That's
All right. Just shifting back to the Chalongos building real quick. I think we've already pretty much covered the setback coverage FAR type issues, and the testimony from the architect was nothing's getting worse, everything's staying the same or improving. So I'd like you to focus on the landscaping then. Is there any practical way that you could get 10% of that site landscaped and have it actually appreciated by the public in any real way?
No, you would not.
Okay. And is that because the building's actually set immediately at the lot line and the front and the side on Bay Avenue and Cedar?
That's correct. That was the intent of the planters, that's the front of one bay.
Okay. Let's see, you testified that there's a shed on the parking lot, is that true?
That's true.
And that's proposed to be removed?
That is correct. The shed will be.
Does that allow you to incorporate more parking on the site?
Correct.
What's the existing parking?
I stated in my testimony, I believe it's 15 parking spaces now. We gained an additional 2 spaces where the shed was.
So 17 total? And how many are required?
4.
Okay, so we have over 4 times the required parking?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions for this witness, but I'd ask the board and the applicants to be professional.
You seem to really be the purchase lot makes it one of those two? Right?
Yes. Correct.
This application,
Not part of the Not part of the application?
no, not in this application.
Not supposed to be developed.
Why can't you put a couple of 88 spots there or something in the future? It's not active, by the club say yes.
It could be a future consideration. We did not notice for that lot. It's not part of this application. I mean, about the most that we could represent is we'll take the storage, the trailers and other things that may be on site. They will come off the site. We would seed it. And if there were some acceptable fencing or hedges or something like that, we could incorporate it.
Question for you. So you're saying that you have 17 parking slots. That's going to be exclusively for the dispensary?
Yes, where you can.
Yeah, there was a question in the review letter about whether there'd be dedicated spaces specific for employees, and if the board felt strongly about that, we were supposed to do that. We could put those spaces at the extreme south of the lot, furthest away from the site, leave the other spaces open for customers.
I guess what I'm really concerned is, just the general foot traffic across the street. People parking there, in and out of that parking lot. You talk about making that neighborhood wider. I'm just concerned about the impact on Cedars, on Bay Avenue.
They're currently in the parking lot.
Restaurant has certain hours, Friday, Saturday.
The traffic engineer that will testify to this traffic as well.
I think it's a valid question, Mr. Knox, and I want to just kind of unpackage it a little bit for 1 second with you. 2 things that come to my mind immediately is we're more of a daytime business, so people are going to be in plain view and plain sight as opposed to being in the dark when they're crossing the street. Also, the existing business serves alcohol. People could imbibe. I'm sure that they would take precautions not to overseas anyone, but it is a possibility. We will, of course, have no consumption on site of the product that we sell. So those 2 things may make it a little bit safer crossing the street.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, I had probably a handful of things just to kind of go through for clarity purposes. So in terms of the design waivers, we kind of talked about pre-existing conditions on the lot, building lot. Talked about the width of the driveway proposed for the sprinter van loading type zones. There's probably one question. I guess as a point of reference, there can be parking on the opposite side across from there. Did you do any investigation in terms of the viability of the van being able to actually get in and out of that space readily if there are vehicles on the other side parked?
Yes, the size of the van, I think we were expecting would be about 6.5 feet wide by about 17, 18 feet long. in a driveway width, I think was, if I'm not mistaken, 40 foot.
I think it's 10 at the curb cut, but widening out to 11'1" in the back of the site, is that right?
Yeah, it's toward the back, so it's 19 for the vehicle parking, and widens up to 11 at the rear. So there's enough room for a sprinter size van to pull in and pull out. I think that's fine.
Would you think they would, pull up back into the space?
That's what I was expecting.
More likely, right? So,
Let's pull out head on.
so your opinion is that that could be serviceable for the intent
Yes.
of a Sprinter van?
Yes.
Okay. We talked about lighting. There was comment about the Seadrift parking lot, only needing the one, design waiver. Is your testimony that the distance from the driveway to the intersection is more than 25 feet?
Yeah, I double checked it.
And you know what that measurement was?
It was around 20 miles.
And I think part of the confusion may have been whether the curbing was or wasn't included, and it does say to the street line, the paved right away one.
So section 6514A of the ordinance talks about the parking provided off-site. It does say any part of the parking requirement located on a private lot other than the one on which the use is located shall be subject to a cross easement or agreement noted on the deed and recorded in the county clerk's office. Could you speak to a couple things? I think one of the concerns we're hearing is the representation is that you really only need, I think, 4 spaces for the retail use by calculation strictly from the ordinance. 2,300 square foot building, 600, 1 space per 600 gives you a demand of 4. I think we all sort of have a speculation that that's probably not enough. I think as we're finding some of these facilities, I would expect it to probably move more. I get it. That's what the ordinance says. That's what they're obligated to present. But here, so it seems like if you have 17 spaces, you think you're going to need 4. You're probably going to need more than that. Could you provide testimony just outlining, in terms of what Mr. Anderson said before, it was likely that there were going to be multiple LLCs controlling. So I think it's important that the board understands, A, that the spaces are going to be reserved for particular use, that other people aren't going to be allowed to park there. I think we have to have a conversation about how do you specify that someone else isn't going to come in there and park. Is it going to be demarcated in numbers or signs or something saying not public parking? I don't know exactly how it's used today. If there's some, friction there today with people just using it maybe illegally or whatever, private property, understandably. But I think it's important that, A, you address the section of the ordinance that talks about preserving. We've all been in the land use world told stories where, hey, we're going to save this, and the next thing you know, there's 5 other businesses using the parking lot, and it becomes kind of a problem. So I think it would be helpful to understand, and perhaps this is the attorney more so than...
Yeah, maybe I'll let Mr. Poppy handle the signage, like if there was a...
We're planning to keep the existing parking sign and put the new corporate logo. It's indicated that parking lot is meant for egress. And then you mentioned signage for employee parking possibly, and constant security maintenance on the property.
We have an on-site security. I don't suggest that they're in time as well spent enforcing parking, but if it was important to the board, we could make endeavors to enforce parking, put up a sign indicating you'll be towed, whatever the compliant signage is, so that you can do that lawfully. As far as your question, Mr. Herman, on ensuring that the lot actually gets used in connection with the use and doesn't get used by somebody else, and again, I'm more than willing to recommend to my client, consistent with the borough ordinance, that they enter into what's called a memorandum of lease. It's kind of like a short form of lease. There's always a more detailed lease that you keep private with all the economic terms, but the memorandum of lease can be recorded with the county clerk. It can give you the basic terms, and included among that could be things like exclusivity of use and duration of the lease. More or less, I would envision that the only way that the applicant could cease using this parking lot for their use would be if they came back before this board or your planning board at some point in time for some kind of amended site plan approval. So don't envision that happening, absent a further continued discussion on that topic.
parking is going to require bringing some back. And I think that a condition in this ordinance resolution that the terms of the recorded documents, recorded movie, for example, by office and applicant's attorney, so that it must be coterminous with the existing kind of public use.
Sure.
The minute you use that parking space, you use that use.
Yeah.
You have to come back to the board with alternate parking, within a reasonable.
I agree. And the easy way to make sure that that happens is, of course, both lots are going to be owned by separate entities with the same principles, so they can make sure that happens. That can be put into writing. And I think the only exception to it would be absent further land use approvals that change it, right? Because things change over time, and if they wanted to come back to you and try their hand at something else, you know, I guess they'd be free to.
Once I knew that both of the lots are going to be owned by the city principals, so that there's this lease structure does not bother me, because the same people who are operating the cannabis are going to need that parking across the street. So they'll be recorded or something of that nature that has to be done.
And I would also suggest that Business 101 would suggest that it's in your own best interest to obviously provide convenient parking for your customers, otherwise they might go somewhere else.
And to police the lot so that there's no trespassers, because if they were to get injured on the lot, it's a liability issue as well.
One other thing I just want to bring up once again, you said there's change out the length and the sign. How about a new sign?
So, yeah, it was a plan.
How about something nice?
Just completely redoing the entire sign with a brand new sign, with a whole new post sign, board, and everything. And the historic sign as well.
Thank you.
Public, you get a chance to speak today?
Yeah.
Right.
It's starting at 10 o'clock.
We're not going to vote until everybody gets their 2 cents in.
Well, nice and late for everybody.
Yeah.
Talking about stupid fences and plates.
Are there any further questions of this witness? All right, we'll call, our planner.
Right, before we get into proceed, some of the people here, I just have some questions you'll answer. I would like to, I guess, put a hold on your next witness and to offer an opportunity for people in the audience to ask some of your professionals who already testified some questions only. Okay, so they get back. You can come up, we're going to need,
And all our questions. You have to relate to the
and also, I do understand, 10 o'clock cutoff, okay, so that we want to make sure everybody gets their words right. That all, evidence is This will be continued, hold on, this will be continued, we don't finish tonight, this will be continued at the next meeting next month. I'm gonna have some kind of factory.
And you put it at the end of the night so everybody has to leave their kids home?
I'm sorry, right.
Okay, so for the parking lot, I'm sorry, Brianna Santoro, and I live at 62 Cedar. Santoro. So in regards to the parking lot, since it's 2 separate entities, is it going to be public parking when it's closed? How does that work?
We were not intending to do that. If there were some sense that that was desirable, from the town's perspective, since we do close, relatively early, and maybe there's a chance to work through that, I'd defer to my client on it.
Okay. And then you also noticed that you would assume that around 30 people would be in the building at once, but there's only 17 spots. Where do you think that this overflow of cars will go with the tight parking right in the area?
Your street.
Yeah. And to keep in mind, with CJ's behind Chicago's, many people don't have driveways, so we're street parking as it is. So I'm just curious what the plan is for that.
So the testimony was the capacity is 30. We're not anticipating that there necessarily be 30 at any one time. There might be, there might not be. We've got 17 spots, we're only required to have 4. So we have 13 more than required under the ordinance.
So I think if I remember correctly, there's about 4 to 5 employees, 15 in the waiting room, and then another 15 in the shoppable area. Was that correct?
So it's over 30?
Definitely 5 employees minimal, 30 capacity. I mean, at the end of the day, there's an objective parking standard on the books as to what we're required to provide, and we're providing 4 times what we're required to provide.
Okay, that's just a concern of, I'm sure, other local residents. Next one. What about people walking out the product? Since the parking lot is within the 1,000 feet, wouldn't that technically, of the school, wouldn't that technically be?
Because you can't have a cannabis retailer within 1,000 feet. It doesn't say you can't possess cannabis within 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Cannabis is legal in New Jersey. It's not the same as marijuana. It's not a controlled dangerous substance anymore.
Okay. And just for my own knowledge, where is the CBD zone in Highlands? Is it only this side of Highlands, or is there an option for the businesses? I'm all for it. I would love it, but it's not on the street. It's
all they have.
So it's only they have, so it's not an option to go on 36 where there's less traffic.
36 is an option.
Okay, it's a designated. So it's only on Bay Ave that is the zone. Got it. Let's hand next question. So earlier with the redevelopment plan, state regulations might conflict with it. So would that imply that this is not the correct location for the business? I was talking about design elements for the building. Right, but then the state requires certain things as far as designs of the building. So if it conflicts with Highlands plan, would that mean that another building might be a better location?
Well, if it was complying with, I guess if it was complying with standards, then that would be not part of our application.
So we haven't elected to be considered under the redevelopment ordinance. There's pros and cons to doing so. Mostly they incentivize you to do it by giving you no floor area ratio requirement or additional height. Bonuses to comply with the ordinance and follow those design criteria. We're electing to be governed by the CBD zone, and the CBD zone, as all other zones, have just general design criteria. And so I think the witness's testimony was we meet all of those design criteria with the exception of the parking spaces being located within 12 feet of the southern end of the parking lot. On the parking lot, the landscaping on 272 Bay, as well as the driveway width being 10 feet as opposed to 15. So otherwise, we comply fully with all the design criteria.
Okay, and then my last question is consumption. So it's not on property. Are you going to have security around, outside of the property to make sure, or it's only on premises? I know you mentioned that that's not a regulation, but I mean, am I going to come outside? I know my neighbors have kids in St. Mary's. Like, are we going to walk outside and there's going to be people hanging out in my front lawn? I mean, I do it in my house. I own the house.
I understand it. It's a fair question. You live there. You want to know. The reality is we can't police the whole town. You have a police force that enforces things like that. So, you know, they presumably, if somebody was doing something that weren't legal, they'd have a say about it. If they were doing something that was legal, you know, they would leave them be. I mean, we can encourage our customers to be good neighbors. I don't get the sense they're going to purchase and come out and consume off premises. They're probably going to go back in their vehicle, go to their home and consume, but.
I'll just chime in if you don't mind. It's illegal in the state to use cannabis. So you can't smoke on the street, you can't use it on the street, and the penalty is a warning. I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
And then one other question I had. The board members, as there was 2 terms that were used, recusal, and then what, are we able to know why they were?
Well, it's pretty simple. Mr. Monaco, either A, lives or owns property within 200 feet, like you probably noticed, his property. You got notice of mail, certified mail. You get something with certified mail, you either recuse yourself. The particular values they're going for, the mayor and the councilwoman are eligible to vote on those.
Got it.
Certain things they are.
Got it. I was curious why.
Certain things they can't. Part of it.
I was curious.
I do have a question in regards to the parking. Is the parking going to be under surveillance, or you have the police? Police security. You kind of touched on something in my mind. They get their products. I got a parking. Next thing you know, it's now okay. That's also security. I mean, obviously, it's illegal to drive as well, under the influence of marijuana. My concern is you're going to get it, depending on the parking lot. And then see the parties, you hang on the parking lot, next thing you know, there's a frisbee, next thing you know, there's music.
I certainly don't want to make light of it. It's people's lives, it's their homes. It's a good question and a good observation. I've just observed, like, liquor stores, they've been around a long time. People know what they expect, but you don't have that kind of behavior going around. People buying the stuff, for the most part, buying and hanging out. Yeah, I mean, we can sign it, we can put cameras there, we can encourage the police to actively enforce it. It's a revenue source for the town if that really happens.
Okay.
Really important.
I don't want to be in charge. If you want the microphone.
I'm sorry, you have to go up there.
Just,
Name and address.
David Reeves.
Name and address, please.
David Reeves, 91 Cedar.
And this is a question.
Question. How do you want SS? Your business online alcohol. How do you collect money? Cash, credit card? Cash or debit, that's forms of being a cash business with a 10-foot driveway. How do we get back on the Brinks truck? Make sure money is securely taken from and to the site. This is where the security, how are we going to do this?
Well, the Brinks truck presumably could park in the parking lot. If they park, well, they park in bank parking lots all the time and go in and get money.
So,
Yeah, I'm learning, but.
that's just my question. So the only product that will be securely backed into the location is the actual flower and parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of using the parking lot, it was important to us. We weren't going to use it for any kind of loading or unloading of the product. But there's as you mentioned, Brinks trucks on security guard. They handle it for casinos, they handle it for banks. I never really heard a suggestion that a bank shouldn't open in the neighborhood because it could be a security issue, and they handle tons of cash.
Okay.
Another question?
Jim Karshmer, 131 Marina Bay Court, Karshmer, and again, just right around the corner. This is somebody who's not been in this business before. This is a question. This is a question. Not been in this business before, right? But we're supposed to, what I want to know is how, there's a bus stop, a children's bus stop. 4 o'clock in the afternoon is the late bus. They're certainly open for business. Kids walking to and from. How are the kids going by this new dispensary now? That's supposed to be just like, oh, okay, we understand. We can't see them there, and they have LED lights. And we've got a park right down the street. This is what you guys are deciding on for our, we don't know what it does to property values. The question is, what are you doing about the bus stop? And the kids in the area. They get off the bus at Cedrus Avenue every day, twice a day.
I don't know what rebellion means, so you might have to.
So something that I think is really important to understand fundamentally is this use is conditionally permitted in the zone along the entire stretch in the CBD. So we're not talking about allowing use that's not permitted. What we're talking about is, can you still have that use even though we deviate when it comes to minor landscaping things, the location of the parking, the width of the driveway, and some.
What you don't know what to expect with this, and it's not a residential area. We're not in a strip.
Thank you, ma'am. We understand all the things that are at stake. That's why we're having a hearing. We're getting all the information, all the details, both from the professionals and from you folks.
Question.
And we're worried about the same thing. And it means a cut. No, you didn't make any information. Here's what they're talking about. Or are
We're talking about variety. We're not anywhere near this.
Is to do a thorough hearing
and decided the location fits the requirements of our land use code. So one of the obligations that we have is to make sure it's not within 1,000 feet of the school. That's a legal obligation. There's not a legal obligation with a point to that says it can't be within a certain number of feet from a bus stop. But it's consideration of
That is the bus stop. We've already dealt with the cheaper going from this is a nice little town to
I'm sorry, yeah, we can't talk about other applications or things around town.
Nothing to statements, because that's very important.
Yeah, there'll be a time for that, for sure.
It's questions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're under the impression that it's ending.
No. Okay, I'm going to okay, this hearing is going to be heard until it's completeness. They still have, what, 2 more witnesses?
That's correct.
Right. At any point of this, okay, we're going to hear all their expert testimony from all of you folks with questions, statements. There'll be more questions from us. They have 2 more people they need to bring up. What are the 2 more?
We have a professional planner and we have a traffic consultant, traffic engineer.
Right, that's going to open up a lot of things for us to discuss, our engineers discuss, our lawyers discuss, and of course, the audience to absorb, put in questions, put in statements. This is not done tonight, okay? As a matter of fact, we're already over our time limit. I would recommend that you hear your questions, and then we close down tonight, and we schedule this for the next hearing.
I have one more question for the next month. Can you guys wait next month?
She's up there. She's up there. What? She's up there.
And they'll, you can hang out, please, don't really leave. You wouldn't go ahead next.
Patricia Camerata, Camarata. I live at 63 Cedar Avenue.
I usually pre-start, so I'm very, very clear. This meeting is not over tonight. Okay, this is going to be continued. If we don't, obviously, we're not going to finish. We have 2 more witnesses. They have a lot more of their testimony they need to present to the board and to you folks. So this happens very often. Applications often run into over their time, and we just reschedule for the following month, same place, same time, and we continue on with that.
And it will be the first application.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Hold on, sir.
Is this only for New Jersey? And can out of state people come in?
I'm not sure that's relevant for this.
Yes, we can look at 6 states, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, that don't have.
Yeah, but I think you're going down somewhere we're going to go down right now. But
How many of these retailers are you accepting in our town? Okay,
One.
so just one. And there's 2 other locations that are sort of moved, right?
Yeah, that's here's the location. I'll tell you the whole city on it.
What near the bakery, are they on there?
They came before the
Your
school.
location, so did they get approved?
They got approved. Okay, they met the requirements.
One step in the state application.
Right, I'll take
So
it.
why are we?
Well, hold on.
Entertaining this?
Because, I'll take it. The state makes the final decision on who opens up the islands or not. Okay, they come through here on a conditional, license. They need to get our approval. They take that or if they don't get our approval, that's probably a big problem for them. Unless they give them approval. They then in turn go to the state, and the state will make them go through whatever other procedures they have, and they will make the determination on who opens up the islands. So we're a stepping stone in the process. We can approve, for argument's sake, 10 applications, we're still getting 1. We can approve 3, 5, 1, where it may be, the state is final determination on that.
You guys, any of you have like this next door to you? There's 6 next door to you.
Yeah.
Any of you have one next door to your house? Is there one way to okay. Is there armed guards? How many? And this is all cash, so you're gonna have this a lot of cash. And this, so you're gonna have armed guard with potential of theft, criminal activity, right?
Those studies.
I mean, that's next door to my house, so it's personal.
Well, I understand, too, there, just keep questions. There'll be a time for statements.
Question. That's one of my house. And, also, oh, well, my, property values are down.
I'm not sure this board can answer that. That's not our responsibility. to answer that.
Again, just coming back to the fact, this is a permitted use in the zone. So what we're talking about is deviations from the standards for that use, right? That's why we're talking about things like landscaping, things like driveway width, things like bulk criteria. I understand. I just want to make the point that it's already been zoned, so it's been zoned to allow the use. The only reason that we need these variances is because there's some technical deviations in how our site's going to be laid out. That's not correct.
And your school and your park. And the school walking dogs.
That does not trigger a variance.
I think at this point, we should probably wrap up the application for this evening only. And then, this is what we like to, I'm sure you want to reschedule for the next meeting.
Yes. Further notice?
There'll be no more notifications, direct mail or certified mail. It will be posted on the website. I'm sure you'll see it on Facebook as well. March 9th, same place, 7 o'clock. Get your questions ready, statements ready, popcorn done. And there's a lot more activities to go, so we're not anywhere near
Please, maybe keep it. But just please, be mindful that there is confidential. So. So Bruce did it. Okay.
There will be on the website. Facebook. And back here next month. Exactly where we left off.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Email me too. Please. Thank you.
Approval minutes, 12/20, 2002, I need special minutes, special meeting minutes. Any discussion on them? For a motion?
Second, anybody? Mr. Zill? Okay, Chief Burton? Mr. Kutash? Mr. LaRussa? Mr. Zill?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney?
Yes.
Chair Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, these are the vouchers, any item report?
Do you want to carry that for next meeting?
Okay, also, here's, you didn't know this, I think we should take care of these exams and master plan as well. I think that is coming up.
I will look into that.
I think it is.
I will look into that.
Take note of that. Okay, okay, motion to adjourn. I'll make it.
All right, so that's Vice Chair Tierney and Mr. Zill second, and all in favor. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 10:13. But your book should be coming shortly. So you should be getting a book of like land use and then I will give it back. I gotta do like I will put mine for pictures. Well, everyone else has like, so you can put doctor. Should I? Dr. Ann, got it. Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm gonna know if Dr. Peterson. Sorry. No, it's fine. Definitely. I was forced that I would tell you to do it. And you didn't. You've earned it. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Yeah, I'm guessing that.
Yeah.